Greetings and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for Monday, December 14th, 2020. Call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Let the record reflect that all the council members are present, including newest council member Mike Berman. Congratulations and welcome. And then also the city administrator, Brian Canrath. With that, I would like to invite everybody to participate in item number 3 of the agenda, the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is located behind City Administrator Canrath. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. We have no items under general tonight. Any committee correspondence to council? Seeing no committee correspondence to council. Moving to item 6 on the agenda, public comment. City Administrator Canrath, any public comment tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have one piece of public comment. I'll read into the record.
Thank you.
This comes to us from Betty Brunswick, 11 Old Orchard Road. She writes, Dear City Council, I have 2 items that I wish to address. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Mike Berman on his recent appointment as Ward 4 City Councilor. I know your passion for this city, and I further know that you will represent Ward 4 as well as Saco citizens in general with great attention and governance. Secondly, on behalf of the Economic Development Commission, I would like to thank Denise Colbert along with the whole Economic Development team and city staff who successfully implemented the sale and closing of the former Public Works facility at 351 North Street to Allegiance Trucks. The diligent work of the Saco Planning and Economic Development Department, along with our legal staff, saved the city at least 15 to 18% in commission and helps to give back more to Saco's general fund. Allegiance is a welcomed addition to our community and should be an impressive presence in its very visible location. Respectfully, Betty Brunswick, Chair of the Saco Economic Development Commission. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, City Administrator Canrath. For those in the attendees, if you would like to participate and provide public comment, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9 if you're calling in from a cellular phone. Again, raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9 if you're calling in from a cellular phone. First up, we have Don Gerard. Don, you've been allowed to speak. Go ahead and unmute, provide your comments to the council. Please start off with your name and address for the record, and then 3 minutes.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, my name is Don Gerard, currently chairman of the city's planning board. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. First of all, thank you for allowing me to address you this evening on a matter that I believe is of significant importance to the city as we embark on establishing the long-range planning committee and developing a new comprehensive plan. My comments are related to your consent agenda item, Roman numeral 8, subparagraph F, page 13 of your packet this evening, dealing with appointments of council members to liaison positions with the city's boards and committees and appointments to the recently established long-range planning committee. I'm surprised and disappointed that Ward 7 Councilor Nathan Johnston is not proposed to continue as a liaison to the planning board. And I'm doubly surprised and disappointed that he is not being put forward as one of the 2 city council members making up the membership of the long-range planning committee. Councilor Johnston has worked tirelessly and devotedly as a participant in many planning and zoning efforts in the city of Saco over a span of many, many years. I've witnessed, just as I did with his father, our former mayor, Mark Johnston, the efforts of a person who truly wants to see the best for all of Saco and who participates wholeheartedly whenever and however he can. Councilor Johnston's latest work on the Zoning Ordinance Revision Committee since 2018 and more recently working with the planning board on finalizing the revised ordinances and maps you have before you waited this evening for first reading, have been nothing short of remarkable. Caring, devoted, hardworking, insightful, rational, level-headed. These are just a few things you can say about the way Councilor Johnston views and participates in contributing to planning Saco's future. Please do not interpret any of this as an indictment of the abilities and qualifications of other councilors whose names have been put forward for these appointments. We will always need fresh viewpoints and insights to the city's planning efforts, and I'm confident that others can and would make significant contributions in that regard. However, as the old adage goes, we should not throw out the baby with the bathwater, and we should continue to avail ourselves in any way, shape, or form of Councilor Johnston's vast planning experience and expertise. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, for allowing me to address these remarks to you this evening.
Thank you, Don. Up next, we have Kevin Roach. Kevin, you've been allowed to speak. Go ahead and unmute and present your comments to the city council. Again, state your name and address for the record in 3 minutes.
Oh, I'll keep it brief. This is Kevin Roach, 18 Vines Road. First, my own congratulations to Mike Berman. Great addition to council. Look forward to working with him on different issues, especially SOS Saco Bay. Appreciate him joining the council. Just a quick disappointed to hear that Nathan's not going to be on the planning board. My thought was that commissions would be able to rotate overall, but I hope this isn't just a one change here, that if councilors do want to become a liaison to different commissions, they should be able to rotate as best you guys can decide. I know it's the mayor's decision, but and if the long range planning, I mean, I definitely value Councilor Johnston's inputs on that. For your joint school board meeting tonight, I want to make sure that there is priority when talking together on budgets on new schools. New school, new school, new school. There are plenty of needs in the city, understood, but you have to work collaboratively to get new schools going. First step on council side is to find the land. I understand that we might not be pursuing, you'll hear it later, the land that the city bought possibly for industrial park. It doesn't have to be industrial park. It can be a smaller business park or what have you, but you need land to do priorities of the city. And there is no bigger priority than once and for all resolving a new school. And I hope with a new board, a forward-thinking superintendent, that will become a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Any further public comment? If so, please use the raise hand feature or *9 from a cellular phone. Now, next we have John Harkins. John, you've been allowed to speak. Go ahead and unmute. Provide your comments to the city council. Again, ask that you state your name and address for the record, and please keep it to 3 minutes.
John Harkins, 4 Christopher Terrace. Congratulations to the new member, Mr. Burnham, on his success being appointed to the council. I want to be brief, but few things I'd like to comment about. I tried to last week to get in, but I had a few problems. Chief Duras has many years service, and Michele Hughes, outstanding department heads for the city. I'd like, and the focus of the council of all the things that are happening around us, it's got to be the shoreline and focus on pressure on the Army Corps of Engineers, number one. Also, the need for a new school. It's been long overdue. We have the state in our side at this point. We got to move ahead with those two major priorities. As I look through the packet here and read the finance report, in the past many years, I've been concerned about financing. The transferring of money between accounts seems to be quite arbitrary. I do not like the term forecasting. I don't think it has any reason to be in a municipal budget format. I prefer the term estimated actual. I think that's a recognized term. And I think the council needs to receive a regular dated monthly finance report. And with that, I'll sign off. Thank you much for your time.
Thank you very much, John. Any further public comment? Again, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9 from a phone. Seeing nobody seeking any other public comment. Moving on to approval, or item 7, approval of the minutes for November 30th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor Gunn, second by Councilor Minthorn. Any discussion on approval of the minutes? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Gosh, it's been months now since I first requested that we have an agenda item pertaining to the minutes. So I'm just gonna ask again that I be given the opportunity to formally address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands raised, no councilor seeking recognition, a roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
I'll abstain.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston?
No.
Okay, the motion passes with 5 yeas, 1 nay, and 1 abstention. Moving on to consent agenda items, number 8, we have A through E on the agenda. We have 1, item A, confirm the mayor's appointment to the Arts Commission of Ray Lund. Confirm the mayor's appointment to the Intercultural Competency and Awareness Committee, Carrie Lamothe. C, confirm the mayor's appointment to the Solid Waste Advisory Committee of Dean Lamson. And D, reappointment of Michele Hughes as Registrar of Voters. Item E, reappoint of James Henderson to the Coastal Waters Commission. And item F is the boards and committee liaisons appointment. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Is there anyone like to pull anything from the consent agenda? Council Archer?
Yes, I'd just like to pull item F. I have a commentary for that item.
Council Archer, did you want to pull an item off of there?
Yes, I'd like to pull item F. I have commentary on that item.
Item F?
Yes, thank you.
So item F will be moved down to action items. It will be the first item that we take up. Council Archer, your hand is still up. Is that from before or are you? Okay, fair enough. Thank you. On item A through E of the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve items A through E on the consent agenda. Councilor Minthorn.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion on item A through E? Seeing no discussion and no councilor seeking recognition, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy,
Yes.
Counselor Gunn,
Yes.
Counselor Berman,
Yes.
Counselor Minthorn,
Yes.
Counselor McPhail,
Yes.
Counselor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much, everyone. We are now at item 9 of the agenda. Item F was the item that was in the consent agenda, and it was moved down. So, Counselor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is the practice of the city council to have council members serve as a liaison with the city boards, committees, and commissions. By code, some committees and boards include voting rights. The mayor has made updates to the individuals appointed to these bodies and is seeking council confirmation. The city solicitor has approved this process. The rules and order of business contain a brief description of these boards, committees, and commissions. Be it ordered that the city council approve the mayor's appointments as detailed in the document titled Saco City Council Liaison and Appointments to Committees, December 14th, 2020.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Purdy, second by Counselor Minthorn. Discussion? Counselor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the reason why I'd ask for to comment on this item is that I disagree that we are able to actually vote on this item, as we are the same council that voted on these appointments about a year ago. This cannot be considered an emergency motion. This is specifically related to Robert's Rules of Order, and when we bring back new items to the floor, again, we are the same council. I do want to recognize, though, that in the future, a year from now, we will literally have a new council every year, so theoretically, we would be bringing these up. However, in this format, based on what we're working with at the time, we cannot actually consider this motion this year. That is why I brought this up and presented to the council and to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Archer. Any further discussion? Counselor Johnston.
Thank you. Well, several. Procedurally speaking, we have a new committee, the Long Range Planning Committee, that has appointments, yet the existence of that committee as of right now does not exist. So it would seem it's out of order to actually appoint people to a committee that has not been approved. And then along those same lines that Councilor Archer was just speaking of, I was under the impression last December when we approved these committees that those committee assignments were for the length of those individual terms. The supporting documents with that actually list the councilors' terms next to what appointments they have. Additionally, I've yet to receive an explanation as to why I've been slated for removal from the planning board as liaison. And so I'm again requesting that I have a better understanding as to why I've been slated for removal. As far as I can tell, I'm the only councilor outside of Councilor Archer that looks like he has also been removed from the Chamber of Commerce that has been removed from a committee. And I would appreciate an explanation.
Thank you, Counselor Johnston. Any further discussion? Counselor Gunn.
I just want, thank you. I just want to add for the record, for the justification, or I guess for the record, that I have actually been removed as the member liaison for capital planning, just so that's out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Gunn. Any further discussion?
And
Seeing-
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Johnston.
as these are your appointments, I'm asking for an explanation. I mean, I've attended every single planning board meeting. You just heard from the chair tonight, who also has advocated for me staying. And I don't understand what it is that I have done. I guess the public should understand what it is I've done to not warrant me staying on as council liaison.
Thank you, Counselor Johnston. Any further discussion? Roll call vote on the boards and committee liaison appointments. as put forth. Council Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Due to the fact that I don't believe that this is a legal vote, I'm going to abstain because by voting no, it's actually affirming that it can be voted on. So abstention.
Thank you. Councilor Purdy.
Sure what I'm not, as far as Councilor Archer's comments on whether we can actually vote on that, I honestly, I have no idea. I'm going to make a motion to table this until the next meeting, till we can.
Second.
Motion has been made to table by Councilor Purdy, second by Councilor Johnston. No discussion on the motion to table. Roll call vote on the motion to table. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. To table item F, which was moved down to item A under action items. Now we have what would have been item A, now item B, legislative update. At this point, I would like to promote our new state senator, Donna Bailey, Representative O'Neill,
Representative.
and two new representatives. One you'll know quite well. That's Representative Lynn Copeland, and the second is our friend from the Saco Hollis line, Representative Nathan Carlo. So bear with me as we get everybody moved up to panelist. Okay. I don't see Representative O'Neill, but I'll watch the participant window to see if she joins the meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
Representative Copeland.
I just saw Representative O'Neill on a different Zoom. We're having a planning Zoom for the legislature at this moment. So I bumped out, but I did see her in there.
Thank you very much. Welcome, State Senator Bailey, Representative Copeland, Representative Carlo. Congratulations on your new positions. At this point, we just kind of wanted to see what a legislative update was from your side, and then if there's anything that the council would like to send maybe to Augusta in the next coming cycle. We do know that cloture is December 18th, so we're up against a short window, and I imagine all of you are getting inundated with requests to sponsor and co-sponsor legislation, this wonderful process that it is. So we hope that you'll be looking upon the city of Saco as potentially, if we need anything to put in for cloture time. With that, I think Senator Bailey, you and I have already spoke about an initiative that is something I would like to see through the taxation committee. And then Representative Copeland, I understand that you're putting forth a bill to help us with the Save Our Shores and with the Army Corps to make the state the co-federal sponsor. So thank you. But State Senator Bailey, we'll start with you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and honorable members of the City Council. I extend my congratulations to Councilor Berman. I think this is your first council meeting, so welcome, and thank you for stepping up. For those of you who don't know me, I think you all do know me. Again, I'm Donna Bailey, and I live at Scrimshaw Lane in Saco. And as far as the upcoming session and focusing on things that I think might be of interest for you as far as the city and municipalities, I would say, first of all, generally, of course, we will be continuing to work on increasing revenue sharing and increasing the state share of education cost. And as you know, that translates to lower property taxes. Personally, I am going to, once again, third time's a charm, be resubmitting my bill for senior property tax deferral program. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's a program that was in place from 1989 to 1991, where seniors who qualify, the state pays their property taxes, allowing them to stay in their homes. And then the state pays the taxes to the municipality, so the municipality doesn't lose any property taxes, and the state is reimbursed once the home is either sold or both residents, if there's two of them owning it jointly, or the one resident passes away. Now, the last time this was in place, we had about 2,000 participants, and the reimbursement rate to the state was 100%. So I am going to be reintroducing it this year. We did have it passed last year. We did have a funding mechanism, but because we had to adjourn early, it was not acted on. So I am optimistic, cautiously optimistic, we can get it over the finish line this year. The funding mechanism kind of leads me into the next item that I usually bring up at these initial legislative outlook meetings with the city, which is, I do understand from the sponsor that he will be resubmitting for local option sales tax. But one change he is going to make is to, in addition to what he had in the bill before, that 10% of the revenue be put into the property tax relief fund. And that's the fund that you all may remember that there were $100 rebate checks sent to property owners from the state of Maine. So that's the fund where he's looking to replenish some of that money with the local option sales tax. So I will be supporting that, and hopefully we can get that over the finish line. An idea I received from Police Chief Clements is an issue to do with retaining officers, and in particular good officers. And he related a story of an officer that has been on the force, I think, 4 years. When she joined the force, she did not sign up for MEPERS, the Maine State Retirement System, because she thought she would be moving because her spouse was in the military. They thought they'd be reassigned. As it turns out, she is staying. But the way the MEPERS system is set up for police officers and firefighters, you get one chance to sign up, and that's, at the beginning of when you start your employment. And if you don't sign up then, you can't sign up. And what Chief Clement shared with me is what happens with folks like this officer that he's afraid he's going to lose is they leave the force they're with because they'll go and sign up with a new police force, and then they can sign up for the MEPERS and get on the Maine State Retirement System. So I'm going to introduce some legislation to close that gap and give police officers and firefighters the opportunity to sign up at a later date and to play catch up with the time that they missed if they want to. That would come out of their own funds. The idea that was based on a conversation with the mayor that he mentioned is to introduce legislation to give municipalities the option, not that they would be required to, but give them the option to make up the difference for the veterans exemption for property taxes. As you all are probably aware, veterans are allowed up to $6,000 exemption on their property taxes, but that is based on, and correct me if I'm misstating this, Mr. Mayor, but on community valuations. And so sometimes the maximum exemption that a veteran can take is less than the 6,000. So this would give municipalities the option to make up that difference. Say they were only entitled to 5,700, the city could pass an ordinance or whatever to say they'll make up that difference at $300. So I am going to introduce that legislation. I do have some legislation that I'm actually going to co-sponsor with Representative Carlo, having to do with TIFs, but I don't want to steal his thunder. If you just want to shake your head, Nate, are you going to talk about that? Yes, no?
You can, I wasn't going to talk about it.
Okay. Well, I thought that perhaps, I mean, even though it's brought to our attention by the head of the select board in Hollis, that it might be of interest to you all as municipalities. What it is to change the allowed uses for TIF money to include improvements or replacements to government buildings, to municipal buildings. In particular, this is something in Hollis, they've needed a new town hall like for a long time. But it again, that just may be something that I thought might be of interest to you. So that's what I have on my list. I certainly am welcome to any other suggestions, ideas. Feel free to reach out to me. As Mr. Mayor mentioned, cloture is on the 18th this Friday. So if you do have an idea, get to me quickly. And thank you. I'm welcome to answer any questions you may have as well.
Thank you, State Senator Bailey. Any questions for the senator before we move on to the state representatives? Councilor Menthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Donna, one of the things that going back to those that opt out of Maine PERS, you know, a lot of those opt out situations were done way back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s when there was a small mountain of paperwork required from the different employee levels up through the system to establish those accounts and all that kind of thing. Today, you know, it's a few clicks of the mouse for most of that stuff. While I'm sure the folks in Augusta do not want the employees of the state and subsequently the municipalities to ping pong in and out of Maine PERS, the old notion that it somehow creates a turmoil or funding confusion or investment confusion in the longer term is probably much less today with computerization than it's ever been. So I might suggest for that legislation, they provide a opt-in or opt-out like once every 5 years for an individual. So if they choose because of their personal circumstance to not go in, they don't go in. But at their 5-year anniversary period, they're given a a 60-day window, if you will, to go into the system if they choose to. A lot of the federal systems have rules around that 60-day time period at an anniversary to make those choices. I think it's something that could and should be entertained at the state level. Thank you.
Yeah. No, those are good ideas, and that's kind of what they did. It's similar to what they did with those who have already retired, because that issue came up with people who already retired. That actually where I thought you were going with your original comment, but so it would make sense to kind of make those similar. So good idea. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
Any further? City Administrator Kamath.
Thank you. Senator, just one other thing to add on the Maine PERS. It's not just a problem for the fire and police. It's also an issue, the same issue for all participants in a participating member district, which Saco city employees are. So I know there would be interest in adding everyone under that legislation, not just police and fire, because I know from a number of our employees here at City Hall, they have been here, say 5 or sometimes 10 years, and they didn't know they'd be here that long, and they are not a member of Maine PERS, and they would like to be, but they're stuck. So I just wanted to mention that it includes all participants in they call it a local, I think, participating member district, of which Saco is one of those municipalities. So I think it would be great if we can include everyone.
All right. Thank you. I was not aware of that. I'm learning more about MEPERS than I don't sit on the Labor and Housing Committee, so I can certainly do it for everyone. Again, Chief Clements, his focus is the local law enforcement. So thank you.
Okay, moving on to Representative Copeland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good to see you, Council, and welcome, Mike Berman. Congratulations. And so I have been a legislator for less than 2 weeks, so my report is going to reflect that. One thing I do want to tell you is that I have been assigned to the State and Local Government Committee, and so that's a really good committee for me, I think, and I really want you to use me as a resource for things that you see that are needed. As Mayor Doyle said, the first thing I'm going to do is for Camp Ellis. There's multiple things going on at the same time, so we're just throwing it out there and seeing what sticks. So what I'm going to do, because I can, is put a bill in to authorize the Attorney General to go along with the letter to the Army Corps of Engineers saying that they will be the non-federal sponsor. And then to have that same bill say that once the PPA is worked out, that they will sign on, if they agree with everything, of course. So I think that will take some, since it is a state-owned river with a federal channel and it's a federal jetty, and I've said this many times before, and the city of Saco pays for all of this, it's too much of a burden. So the issue is that if the Army Corps and the non-federal sponsor agree to it, they go forward with this project. If it costs more than the amount that's already allocated, 26.9 million minus what's already been used for studies, plus an additional 5 million that the federal delegation has been able to allocate. If we get the state to, so if we have all that money and they do the project, if it goes over, the non-federal sponsor is left holding the bag to pay to finish the project. And that's too much for the individual taxpayers of the city of Saco to have to bear. So that's why I'm trying to get the state to be the non-federal sponsor. So that's that's the big deal for me. I know Donna had about 10, and I'm happy to sign on to some of hers, but for right now, that's my my first thing out the door for sure. And so, with not much else to say other than that, I wanted to talk to you about Maine Won't Wait. It's a Maine Climate Council program. It's a 4-year plan for climate action, and the governor has put it out there, and it's actually the Maine Climate Council's report for the legislators. So I just wanted to point out a bunch of highlights that I thought would be really good to know and to keep in mind. So, as a guiding document. Well, it's supported by our federal delegates and state leaders and legislators. Youth have chimed in on it. And in fact, United States Senator John Carrie was on the Zoom when this came out, and he is just all about this, in his new role. So he's the special presidential envoy on climate change. And so he was very involved with the discussion about this. It's an extraordinary initiative. The expectation is to be carbon neutral before 2045. All right, there's 45% reduction in carbon emissions in the next decade, which is wonderful. This is urgent. So they're looking to encourage weatherization of homes, weatherization of buildings, to influence the construction of new homes and new buildings. It's going to include transportation and electric buses, which of course we're leading the way here in Saco with our 2 brand new buses. This all leads to better health. So there's less emissions, there's less pollution in the air. It leads to better health. It actually leads to world stability because people aren't dependent upon and setting global policy regarding everything just so that we can have oil, so we'll be more independent in that way. And so what always happens when you talk about all these great ideas is the cost. Think about, everybody says, well, what about the cost? But the cost of not doing these actions is too high. They're going to put a program out, getting heat pumps for people. And they're going to also, and this is a good thing for Saco, they're going to provide climate planning toolkits for municipalities. So that's, so you can go to climatecouncil.maine.gov and you can look for that information there. There you have it, my first update.
Thank you, Representative Copeland. Any questions for Representative Copeland? No questions. You must have covered all the points.
Thank you.
Representative Carlo, welcome.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I think I'm experiencing some challenges with my internet connection, so I'll just dive in, and if you can at any point hear me, please speak up and I'll try to fix it on my end. So thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you all this evening. Congratulations to Councilor Berman on his joining the council. It's really an honor to join Representatives O'Neill and Copeland and Senator Bailey in serving the great people of Saco in the Maine House of Representatives. I want to commend the work the city is doing in light of the coronavirus. The people of your city have come together during this time to keep each other safe. And this is a testament to the strength of your community, and you all ought to be very proud. As you know, there is a lot of work to be done, and while a vaccination is finally within sight, the challenges posed by this virus are far from over. In light of the economic and social ramifications of the virus, I'd like to offer my services to offer legislation on behalf of the city. If any of you would like to discuss that, as it's been previously discussed, cloture is going to be on December 18th, this Friday. And I would be, again, delighted to work with any of you to that effect. So far, I've submitted 2 pieces of legislation. As Senator Bailey briefly mentioned, the first would authorize municipalities to use TIF money to renovate or build town halls or city municipal buildings. The town hall in Paulus has been in a state of disrepair for some time, and I think that it's time that we help them out in allowing them to renovate that facility. The second bill would increase the amount that school districts in Maine are allowed to carry forward in their budget. In discussions that I've had with MS-86 officials, where I'm a school board member, they've reported that the level that it's currently at, which is 3.5%, can limit savings. And we want to make sure that they can carry forward enough to sustain a healthy and reasonable budget. Aside from that, there are a few newsworthy items that I'd like to make the council and members of the public aware of. About 2 weeks ago, the administration announced 3 grant initiatives. The first seeks to provide relief for Maine healthcare providers all across the state. The second would go towards Maine's tourism and hospitality industry. And the third would go towards businesses in agricultural and food processing industries to help them recoup losses that they've had due to the virus. All of these programs have been fully backed by federal CARES Act money, so it's not coming out of the state budget or directly out of the state budget. Another important item that I think the community ought to be aware of is the expansion of publicly subsidized rent relief efforts in Maine. The program is on a first come, first served basis, and it now covers those who reside in Maine housing finance properties. Folks can reapply even if they previously received money out of that program. And as I mentioned earlier, Maine has been tentatively approved for 12,500 or so doses of the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine. Quite frankly, we all know this is not enough, and there are ongoing efforts to secure additional doses. It's my understanding that there were some issues with the supply chain and getting these doses to Maine, and they're working to get that supply chain issue corrected. When it's my turn, I will certainly take the vaccine, and I encourage others to do so as well, so that we can defeat the virus and get back to normal. And simply for the council's awareness, I have been appointed to serve on the Energy, Utilities, and Technology Committee. I sought out this committee assignment because parts of my district still do not have reliable internet or broadband connectivity. And I believe that my serving on that committee will let me actively find ways to correct that issue. And with that, I'd be happy to defer to members should they have any questions.
Thank you very much, Representative Carlo. Any questions for Representative Carlo? Seeing no questions, again, Representative Carlo, you must have hit all the points as well. So,
thank you again for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Councilors, anything? State Senator Bailey.
Thank you. So I realized after the representatives spoke that I failed to mention the committees I've been appointed to. So I have been appointed to the Appropriations and Financial Affairs Committee, as well as Government Oversight. So if you have any,
Thank you.
If you have any questions about the budget, talk to me in maybe 2 or 3 months.
Thank you, State Senator Bailey. Council, any feedback? Councilor Minthorn.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Representative Carlo, since that's the committee you're on, there might be an opportunity to submit some legislation. I know the city of Saco has submitted a new contract request to Spectrum, and it's well over a year since our last franchise agreement expired, and they seem to just really be dragging their feet and enjoying their old contract, which was less beneficial to the city and our residents. I don't know if there's an opportunity there. It might take some investigation from your committee support folks, but I would think something that would kind of leverage our hand and our residents' hand at the table, that they have a given number of months to, after the contract, to negotiate in good faith with the communities and franchise agreements, would be quite helpful for all municipalities statewide. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minter. Representative Carlo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's certainly a great point, and I would be happy to look into that with my office, and I can report back to you with what I find.
Thank you very much for that. Any other feedback? Okay. State Senator Bailey, Representative Copeland, Representative Carlo, thank you very much for your legislative update, and also for stepping up and serving our great community. It's always tough to take the step into the arena, but I'm sure we're in good hands with your leadership up at the State House. So thank you very much. With that, we are on to what was item B, now item C on the agenda, which is the joint school board and council meeting workshop. I think is a typo, just so everyone is aware. This is a meeting between the two boards. So please bear with us as we promote school board members and to the panel here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, with promoting Jeff, I think we've got everybody. I think we've got all the school board members and all the city councilors. So with that, just want to go over for both boards, after sitting on several budgets over the last 5 years, wanted to take an attempt at a different type of budget process moving forward. So what you have tonight is, under the action items, you have item 1, which is an update on city financials, where questions can be asked after the presentation. Item 2, there's going to be an update on the school financials, where the board and the council can ask questions. And then there's going to be a discussion between the council and the school board. And I'm hoping that that will result in a joint consensus on a number that both parties, both the city and the schools, can go up on their budget in the next coming year, rather than have the two boards in an adversarial position going back and forth. Hopefully this will be a nice way to build consensus and keep it to one number for both groupings to work with as they set their budget parameters for the next year. So with that, bear with me. I think I'm missing School Board Member Tardif.
Mr. Mayor, I have him. I've tried for 45 minutes to get him on, but I can't. So he's on my phone. He's watching you via FaceTime.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so with that, at first, we will hear an update on the city financials. City Administrator Canrath.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Finance Director Glenn Salas in attendance who will do a recap for you.
Finance Director Salas, greetings and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'll just be reviewing the information that was included in my memo in the packet and be referencing the departmental totals and the supporting detail. Overall, year-to-date financial performance is strong. We're looking at a net operating income of $5.5 million through the end of November. Net operating income is likely to go down a little bit. We did collect our first half of taxes, which is most of the city's revenue, in September, and the next half is not due until March. So expenses will continue to come in the months between those two tax due dates. Expenses are tracking 2% behind forecast, while revenues are tracking 3% ahead of forecast. An analysis of the department. So for the purpose of this analysis, I focus on departments which are either a little bit overspent or departments that are significantly behind forecast, just to provide council with an idea of how we're tracking for the year. As we get closer to the end of the year, I dig a little bit deeper into each departmental performance. On the expenditure side, our capital projects is 18% ahead of forecast. We're going to look a little bit overspent here because of a purchase order that a vendor required of us for the fire truck, which is actually a lease purchase. So we only budgeted the down payment. Currently, the entire cost of the fire truck has been encumbered. This will be corrected once the fire truck is received. Code enforcement is tracking 12% ahead of forecast. I touched on this a little bit. They were tracking further ahead of forecast in my last update. However, with some openings in the department, the overspend has come down a bit. And based on estimates coming in from the new code enforcement director, this department is actually anticipated to be within budget by year's end. Surplus code enforcement revenues of $74,560 year to date actually more than cover the overspend. Communications is 21% behind forecast. Software fees are typically forecasted up front, but may be expended throughout the year. Other budget items have been slow to be expended due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Contingency is actually over budget for the year by $490. Tax abatements came in $100,000 over budget due to some timing issues with regards to the Betty. So that's driving this entire section over budget. Federal assistance. There is a credit balance of $58,985 on the federal assistance expense line. This reflects revenue received from the Keep Maine Healthy grant. The finance department is actively working on a procedure and policy related to grants tracking. And so this is going to be adjusted within the next couple of months. We're working with our auditors on some guidance related to that. And it is part of the policy rewrites that the finance department has undertaken for the month of December. Human resources is 25% behind forecast. We are experiencing some savings on the open director position. The other half is largely related to the salary study, which has been put out to RFP and which the city will probably expend in the next quarter. Information technology is 25% behind forecast. Similar to communications, a significant portion of this budget is software fees, which are forecasted up front but expended through the year. License fees that remain to be expended include Office 365, Tyler Direct, and Apashore. Parks and Recreation is 26% behind forecast. Of course, the Recreation Department continues to experience reduced programming due to the global pandemic. The savings on these expenditures are offset by lower than forecasted revenues. So we talked a little bit about this as part of the budget process. The recreation side of the Parks and Recreation Department is almost fully funded with fees. So as there's less programming, expenses go down, but so do the revenue, and they pretty much tie to each other. The solicitor is tracking 44% ahead of forecast. Again, several pending legal matters have resulted in higher costs than anticipated. Are there any questions on the expenditure portion of this analysis before I move on?
Finance Director Salas, I don't see any questions. Please proceed.
Thank you. So on the revenue side, building rentals, 48% behind forecast. Rentals for the first quarter in 2021 were booked to fiscal year 2020. Again, the accounts receivable side, another place where we're looking to build out a little bit more robust policy and procedure, just to make sure that we don't have these kinds of classification errors in the future. Federal assistance revenues, we've got a credit balance here of 128. Again, this goes back to grants tracking. This is going to get cleaned up in the next couple of months. Interest earnings, this is a tough one. We are 89% behind forecast. Interest rates on the repurchase market, which is where nearly all of our fund balance is invested, are down 90% versus where they were when the line item was budgeted. Finance does plan to research an investment strategy. We're hoping to be able to maybe improve the city's return on cash, but municipalities are heavily regulated in terms of their options for earning interest revenue. So while I think that we can improve on what we're getting right now, I don't know that we'll be quickly returning to a time of 2% APR. Parks and Recreation revenues. So again, we touched on this, 75% behind forecast. This is revenue loss related to limited programming. Again, the actual amount is almost completely covered by reduced expenses. Planning and Economic Development revenues, 48% behind forecast. With the continued global pandemic, development activity has slowed significantly. And we had also, for the first time, moved this revenue forecast up for this fiscal year, which, given what's going on right now with development activity, it's unlikely we're going to hit that revenue number. Planning and Economic Development, just covered that. Police Department revenues, 67% behind forecast. Most of this is related to unrealized revenues from the NDEA grant program, which is offset by savings on the expense side because the NDEA position is currently unfilled. Transfer revenues, so there's $117,547, which is booked to capital projects revenue instead of miscellaneous transfer revenues. That just related to where the item was budgeted versus where it needs to be booked to meet GASB. And finally, miscellaneous revenues. We have a placeholder line with an annual forecast of $10,000. We're just $750 behind forecast there, so nothing to be concerned about. Are there any questions on the revenue side or any portion of the budget update?
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. And excuse me, this is kind of a dumb question, but it looks like some of the expenditures that are behind forecast will be catching up over the course of the year, like some of the software purchases you referred to. Whereas some of the revenues may stay behind because of the pandemic and lasting costs. And so right now, the budget is pretty balanced. Is there any danger that over the course of the rest of the year, those will start to diverge?
That's a great question. Very perceptive. What I'm seeing specifically on the revenue side is our most significant risk is interest earnings because we did budget $300,000 and we're likely to come in 90% below. So that's a $270,000 loss of revenue. However, state revenue sharing was budgeted very conservatively per state guidance. And the most recent numbers that I've seen coming out from the state are that rather than being down 20%, it's more likely to be down 10% or 5%, which is enough revenue to offset the loss of interest revenue. So we should come out ahead there. I did kind of in this update tend to focus more on the revenues that were concerning, but overall we are tracking 3% ahead on revenues, or about $933,000 ahead of forecast. So I do feel pretty comfortable that we'll still be able to end the year in a strong position.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Any further questions for Finance Director Salas? Finance Director Salas, thank you. No further questions. Do you have anything further?
That's everything for me.
Thank you very much. Finance Director DiDonato.
Good evening,
Welcome.
everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Greetings, welcome, and we can hear you.
Awesome. So I'm just going to do a kind of a quick overview of what I send out every month. It's also in the packet that Glennis had spoke of. We are currently at 38.84% of budget. At this present moment in time, and by the end of November, we should be approximately 41.7% of our expenditure budget. There are obviously some areas, if you review the cover sheet, where some expenses have not come through, such as our debt service payment. We did actually pay that out this December. So you'll see, instead of it being only 2% of budget, it will be fully expensed for the year. One of the things that I try to do every year is do a kind of a detailed forecast by department. I started that process midweek last week and got through quite a bit of it. So I do have some couple areas I'd like to talk about. I'll have more of a detailed analysis at our finance meeting on Wednesday for the school board. A couple of the areas that I'm seeing trending over the next few months. One of them is Fairfield. We are a little bit over budget, currently at 43.08%. We are going to probably end the fiscal year a little bit higher than budgeted, mainly due to our Title I revenues. We have several teachers that are located in the Fairfield school that we use Title I funding to help reduce the student to teacher ratio, and the funding is actually coming in a little bit less every year, and this year we're going to have a little bit of a deficit of about $30,000. Another area that I want to talk about is our Thornton Academy regular ed tuition. If everybody's been at our prior meetings, I discussed last month that we currently have 13 students more than what we had budgeted for. Our total count right now is at 919 students. The way that our tuition works with Thornton Academy is we get the child count for October, and we get the child count in April, and we average the two. So there is a chance that either the enrollment at Thornton Academy can potentially go down or up. It depends on the April snapshot for our student count is. We'll decide what our total student tuition account is. So that's part one of the payment. The other part is the maximum allowable tuition. We have not received that number yet. It comes from the state every year. It comes out in the middle of December, which should be anytime this week. We do have a 2% increase budgeted at this time. Not sure if that's going to stand. So right now, as it stands for this present moment, if the MAT only increases 2%, we're at approximately $141,000 deficit for this fiscal year for our Thornton Academy regular ed tuition. Now, however, we knew about the student count back in September, October being higher than we budgeted. So we did freeze 3 positions that we had personnel leave that we did not refill. So we actually are going to make up the deficit of that at our Saco Middle School. So our Saco Middle School is going to come in under budget this year, approximately $200,000. So that will help alleviate the stress on our regular ed tuition for Thornton Academy. A couple other areas to review. One is our a major department is going to show significant savings is our transportation. We are having significantly less trips. There are no after-school activities. We didn't have any summer school driving for our students. So we are anticipating about $175,000 savings there between salaries, fuel, maintenance. And so that's one area of savings that the pandemic is going to help our budget for this fiscal year. Couple other areas to talk about our special ed department. We had some news from Thornton. I believe it was end of August, early September. We sent the email to the school board. There was an increase in our students that needed one-on-one that entered into Thornton Academy that they were unaware of when they created the budget for us for this fiscal year. So we do have a shortfall with them, about $155,000, but we should have savings within our own special ed department based on positions that haven't been filled due to the pandemic. So we should be able to offset those savings. We also are using some of our CRF funds to help with some of the psych services. So that's helping reduce the general fund impact that we would have need to have done in the beginning of the year to try to shorten the gap on these students to try to see where they are going to be at the end of this fiscal year. Trying to think here, a couple other expenditure areas. Technology's coming in. If you looked on the previous month financials, we had some expenses that hit the general fund that we were able to reallocate back to our CRF, which is the Corona Relief Fund, that we received 2 different payments. I'm sure most of the city council is aware of it. I know the school board is. We had the initial CRF 1 was 1.4 million we received, and CRF 2 was 1.53 million. Both are on track to be fully expensed. We've done things such as air quality tests. We've changed air handlers. We've gotten a ton of PPE for our staff. On order, we've had on order for a couple months now, trying to get all those air purifiers in so that, the winter months we can close those windows. Lots of good things happening, lots of technology, a lot of infrastructure. So if we need to go remote learning, that the teachers have that capability to do so. So these are all good things. We'll discuss more of the CRF funds in our finance meeting on Wednesday if city council or any members of the community want to kind of listen in a little bit more on that. I'll go to the revenue side of things. Right now we're in really good shape. We were worried that there might be a curtailment coming in from our state subsidy, but the governor has been able to maneuver funds so that we do not have a reduction in our state subsidy for this year. There is a lot of discussion that next year there might be a significant reduction in what is being allocated to the schools. So it's something we want to keep an eye out on and see. Hopefully we have that within the next 2 months of where ED 279 is going to be. I know a lot of other areas that one of the areas of our revenue that it's a small concern is transportation fees. We have always budget 210,000. 75,000 of that is transportation, trip transportations, which we're not doing. So we're going to be short about $75,000 in our revenue, but the offset is that our expenditures are significantly lower too. Hence, I talked about a few minutes ago about our transportation being significantly under budget. So those things will offset one another. A good news is Dayton regular education tuition. We only had 6 students budgeted from Dayton to attend our Saco Middle School. We actually have 10. So that will give us a little bit of additional revenue of almost 40,000. Our state agency client and our miscellaneous revenue funds, those all seem to be on par as of the end of November. The hot topic, obviously, of Maine care revenue, we are at 118,000, which is almost 24% of what we budgeted. That funds that have come in is billing based through September and October. And I potentially think it might have been the first week in November as well, but we are averaging a little over $16,000 a week in billing, which is great, seeing how a lot of it's not full time. We have our students are doing the 2 days a week and are still being able to bill for when they're at home doing remote learning with their teachers, which is great. So overall, I'm happy. I feel a little bit better where I felt like the beginning of this school year was going to go. I had some major concerns about substitutes, but it seems that a couple of our areas, like long-term subs, we've had to use in one of our schools, but the others have been significantly less. So we do have some savings in our in our budget this year. I think we'll help to reduce the deficit that we ended with last year, and our revenues seem to be right on course with where we want them to be at this moment. Every month we'll do an update and just kind of, I always fill the board in if there's anything that come up that needs to change, but feel free to answer any questions at this time if you have any.
Thank you, Finance Director DiDonato. Any questions for the Finance Director? Councilor Minthorn?
Yeah, Jason, earlier in the year, we were talking, I don't know, we were already in the red, maybe $250,000, something like that, projected to end the year that way. Are we still on track for that, or do we have any idea where we might fall?
Yeah, no, the beginning of this school year when we talked about, I got the regular ed tuition news for Thornton Academy where we had 13 students more than we anticipated. I still don't know what the MAT rate is. When I do know that, I'll have a better idea. But yes, that was about $140,000 deficit that I anticipated. But because we didn't hire a couple of positions at Saco Middle School, we're actually going to be able to, so be able to take care of that. The other one I was concerned about was when TA also, brought it to our attention that there was, I believe, 6 ed techs that either transitioned from different schools or came up from the schools that they had not originally budgeted that needed one-on-one. So they had another $150,000 that they anticipated. But I do believe that our budget will be able to consume that at this present moment, unless we have significant movement of out-of-district placements come in. But at this point, based on the savings of personnel that haven't been hired due to this time frame, right, the condition we're in right now, I think we're going to be okay. But I'll have more information on exactly where the savings is going to be by line, by account, as we continue.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you. One of the items when we were discussing revenues was that you anticipated cuts in the state share that weren't made this year, but maybe next year. And part of our purpose here is to discuss next year's budget. And I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about that, what kind of cuts you anticipate and how that's going to affect operations for next year.
Sure. Don probably has a little bit more information around that.
Yeah, we really haven't heard anything yet, Michael. So what we'll probably, and we might not hear, it all depends what happens in Augusta. As you heard, our legislators are going up there. They will be getting the forecast. We really don't know. I mean, it could, I'm projecting that we're not going to get as much subsidy as we did this year, just based on pure revenue not coming into the state. So we'll have to see what happens, but we'll probably get a preliminary 279 the end of January like we normally do, but a final one might not be ready by June.
Yeah, there was discussion of something around to the tune of up to 10% of a reduction, but again, that was just conversations had in the legislature, and nothing really came. There was nothing definite that came out of those conversations.
And as we target the budget for next year, we'll need to keep in mind that we may have to make up for that money.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Any other questions? From council or school board? School board member Shea?
There we go. So Jason, with the CRF funds, those need to be completely spent within the next couple of weeks here. Where are you on target for that?
We're actually, we were just having that conversation this afternoon before I left. We are tracking everything down, trying to finalize our invoices in. At this present moment, I believe we were within the tune of $10,000 between the two funds, trying to figure out if the entirety will be able to be spent or if we're going to have to reclass some of it back to the local. There's a couple things that were kicked back, like state, like taxes when you purchase, some of the PPE and some of the other things that were done by some of the schools. They didn't, hand in the certificate of tax exempt, so they're not reimbursing for some taxes. So we have basically spent all $3 million. We're just trying to tally up if we have every dollar spent or if any needs to go back to the budget at this point. We're within $10,000.
All right. And when do you think you'll know that for certain?
We're continuing to work on it and submitting applications every other day. So once all of them are finalized and we get the final invoices, we still have the air quality test bill to come in. We have the air handlers that were put on the SMS. So we'll have those final budget worksheets within hopefully the next week or two, and we'll be able to cut our last payments. Originally, they expressed that they wanted payments made by 12/30. We have to have the product in hand, and we have to have the services and invoice done in hand. And at the time, they said we needed to have a check cut for 12/30. They've actually extended that, so they're giving us another month or two after the fact if we need to make payments. But because we originally were underneath that deadline, I believe we should hopefully have everything processed and finalized by the end of December.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, Finance Director DiDonato. At this moment, we are at item 3, and that is the discussion between the council and the school board on budget. The whole purpose of this kind of was to facilitate a discussion between the two boards to come up with a consensus on a number that both the city administrator and the superintendent will use as a guideline to prepare their budgets not to exceed without coming back to the boards, the school board and then the city council for any kind of increase. This is trying to avoid any of the issues we've run into in previous year budgeting, and really so that everybody's on the same sheet of music out of the gate as both sides prepare their budgets moving forward. So with that, I open the floor up to discussion. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom, which is in the participants panel. If you go in there and if you click on in there, there should be a raise hand feature. And I see many of you have already done that. So with that, Councilor Archer, then Councilor Johnston, then School Board Chair Kevin LaForge. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I figured the first way to start this off is what's the estimated contracted expenses already? Because that's really going to be our bottom line, is what the unions and all these other contracted expenses we already have. So at this point, what are the estimated contracted expenses for the next fiscal year? Is my first question, and that'll help guide the rest of the discussions for all of us, I think.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. City Administrator Kainrath.
Yeah, thank you. I think Gladys might have some numbers for projections, but I will say you may or may not. We have 5 collective bargaining agreements up this coming year in the spring. Now the timing is such that we may not have those negotiations concluded by the time a budget is together. I did talk with Gladys last week about that sort of scenario and what's happened in the past. And I guess in the past we have budgeted an amount of contingency to cover potential increases in contractual obligations. So we may find ourselves in that situation, but we do have 5 contracts up next year that expire June 30th, 2021. So we do have to be mindful of that. And that's a bit of an unknown at this point. I think we can make some estimates and guesses, but until those contracts are completed, we won't have hard numbers.
Can we get a generalized number at this time from both sides?
Yeah, I could do the school one if that's helpful.
Superintendent DePatsy, can we just go back to Finance Director Salas first, and then we'll come back to the school?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Finance Department does conduct an exhaustive review of all planned contracted increases in order to sort of determine what our baseline maintenance of effort budget is. The timing of that is typically in January, so we haven't started collecting that information from department heads yet. I would say off the top of my head, we did have 3% year over year increases across all of our base pay lines, and base pay is the most significant portion of the city budget. So a 3% increase, I think, would be a safe number for our maintenance of effort budget. But I can't speak to anything more definitive than that at this time.
Finance Director Salas, thank you very much. Superintendent DePatsy.
Yeah, Jason can chime in too. So we have, our teacher's contract is good for the next 2 years. So we have that increase. However, the new board, when they pick their, actually it's the chair and the vice chair and the chair of the personnel committee, they have to start negotiating ASAP in January because we have 2 contracts to finish. But in history-wise, it's about, last year, Jason, was about $550,000 between the 3 contracts primarily.
No, well, yeah, the teaching contract actually had significant higher increase than that. It was almost it's going to be, for next year, it's going to be almost 800,000 of an increase, which is just under a 6% change. That's just the teacher's contract. I can look, and again, that was with personnel that was here 2 years ago. So a year and a half ago. So it might be a little bit higher, might be a little bit lower, but overall we had just under a 6% increase to the teacher's contract. And I don't have, I can look at the previous year contract for our ed tech secretaries, bus drivers, and custodians, kind of get a historical view on what the increase was for last year.
Thank you, Finance Director DiDonato. Council Archer, does that answer the questions that you had regarding just a basic overview of where the 2 sides are?
I think this will give us a good start to recognize what is already pre-planned expenses are and to build off of these numbers.
Thank you, Council Archer. Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Councilor Archer actually just asked the question I was going to ask, because I do think it's kind of hard to give direction presently, given we don't really have any estimates going forward. But specifically to the school side of things, I guess, Jason, are you aware of any increases to SPED subsidies this year? I had heard that potentially there would be.
So we saw an increase last year to the out-of-district placement. So if you review the ED 279, I believe it's on page 4. We did get a significant increase, and yes, there was told that there should be a larger amount of special ed pumped in as well. We haven't been privy to what the final numbers are going to be yet for the next month or so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
School Board Chair LaFortune.
I'm following up on the same question, which was around the contracted increases, and it was really more around whether or not the math on both the city side and the school side would work to get us to a place where one number worked for both. And I think we just got the answer, which is no, with 6% likely on the school side and 3% on the city side. So I guess from the standpoint of what is wrapped up in this agenda item this evening, is the assumption that there will be a motion this evening, or is this just to get the topic started and get people in the mindset of this is kind of where we're headed?
School Board Chair LaFortune, because kind of as I explained before, and just for reiteration here, the whole idea is to, as we understand that the city is looking at potentially a 3% maintenance of effort with some potential contingency, and these schools are looking at, approximately 6% or 800,000 just to cover the teachers' contracts. The kind of goal was just to get to one number that's a top number, and that this is what you cannot go over, because the school board and the city council have to decide, with knowing that the pandemic is still here, knowing that there's issues still pending, where they want to go as far as if both parties want to increase spending and not not hold the reins on any department budget and just increase spending to whatever the approximate numbers are that have been presented by the staff, or if they want to do a smaller scale budget and then have individual things come back before the representative bodies to discuss further later on in the budget process, or whether it's just a carte blanche as it has been in the past years, where both sides can bring forth the budget they'd like, and then each respective board cuts where they want to cut, and then we get into the adversarial process that has pitted the school board versus the city council in the previous years, where the city council cuts a budget, even though they're adding more to the original line, they're adding more to the spending line, but they end up cutting the overall budget. And what this process is designed to do is have the conversation, arrive at a number, knowing that it's a guideline for both parties to use as we move forward, and therefore not getting into the adversarial pitting of both parties against each other. Because we need to heal as a community and move forward, and not get hung up on the sins of the past, so to speak.
Right.
Does that answer your question, School Board Chair LaForge?
It does answer my question. I don't have concerns about the goal. I guess my concern was to arrive at a number now with very little information feeding into that number, other than a very rudimentary discussion of what potential is there for increases. And then we go away and come back when we have more concrete numbers. What happens if after this number is picked out of a hat that we just were wrong? Aren't we back in the same adversarial place with one number working for one group and a different number working for another group, and they may not actually be the same number?
Yeah, I think, as I stated, this is more of a guideline for both parties to set as their number. It's not set in stone. It's not something that it's more of a guideline, a consensus of both parties. If the boards do not want to make a motion and not want to agree on a number, that's more than fine. But just remember that I don't believe, in accordance with the charter, I don't believe we meet again until February. And then when we do meet in February, you're presenting your budgets in March. And then we get into the substantive discussion about cutting different budget areas. And so this is kind of just a thought process to get everybody on the same page. But as always, I defer to the school board and the city council for whether they want to adopt any kind of guiding number.
Mr. Mayor.
City Administrator Canrath.
If I could just ask a clarifying question, I think I know the answer to this, but if there is a number that's arrived at as a directive, is the onus then on myself and Dom with the budgets that we bring forward and present to you on us to conform to that directive? So if you say 3%, the budget that I present to you, is it then on me to hit that 3%, or am I presenting a budget and you guys are going to figure out where you want to get it down to get to 3%?
City Administrator Canrath, we were experiencing some technical difficulties, but I think I understood it enough that yes, that is the intent, that you would live within the guideline presented and agreed upon by the parties and present your budget that way, and then ask for any overages above that percentage increase in spending.
That was my assumption. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. Jason, maybe you can help with this one too. I know you just said we're looking at possibly a 6%, 800,000 increase on contracts. Your note under the health line of the expenses for the 3 payrolls and the retirement, the board will need to decide if we are filling the vacated positions. Are those the 3 positions at SMS that have just left?
Correct. I'm sorry. Well, one of them was.
Okay.
Let me look to see which, you were under which number?
Note number
the
2.
financials? Number 2.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, one of them was we just had a nurse retire.
Okay.
So that's not included in the savings of the 3 positions that we already elected not to rehire. Correct.
Okay. So when you say that the board is going to be deciding to fill these vacancies,
So
at what point do you think that that will be done so that we would have an accurate number?
I believe that was being discussed, Tom, the next board meeting, or was it the finance meeting?
Well, those positions right now are not filled. So I think what I understand, if we get, for example, whatever percentage is, my superintendent budget, I will not most likely have those positions in there because I got to meet a goal. So those 3 positions, if it's 2%, I can tell you probably will need to do a few more. What the board has to, or the finance committee has to decide on Wednesday night is if they want to have a 4th nurse. Right now, that's coming out of our ESSER funds. So there's another position in ESSER funds too that will be dropped off.
Okay.
So,
is that the same for the 3 positions at SMS? And those are teaching positions, correct?
correct. Right now, we're operating without them. It's tight, but just knowing what's coming ahead, they probably won't be filled on my end. Now, if the board wants to refill them, they can when it comes to them. Hope that helps.
Yep.
Just so a small guidance of our actual salaries. So I wasn't able to pull every single, well, let me rephrase this. I looked at the previous contract, and it was just about 200,000. So if we're averaging about $1 million in increase in contracts, it's approximately 2.3% of our $42 million budget right now. So if we were to have to increase it $1 million, it's about 2.3%. Now that's just the salaries. The other area that we're going to have to look at specifically in the school side is the regular ed tuition at Thornton Academy. We have had a declining enrollment the last 3 years, which has been able to keep our the cost at Thornton Academy regular ed tuition line down. But we are going to start seeing a trend of a larger enrollment back to closer to the 960, 970 student enrollment that we saw 3 or 4 years ago. Right now, we're only at about 913 students. So that's a cost to our budget that we do not have any flexibility in. So that's definitely something we'll be discussing over the next month.
And one more thing too, Jody, is the health insurance. We can't forget that. That could be a lot higher too. So that's another variable that we won't find out until probably March.
Thank you for that. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I was just going to go back to what the city administrator had asked previously as far as a directive from council. My experience in the past is that council can give a direction, but ultimately it's really within the purview of the administrator to present his budget, at which time it becomes council's budget. And then we, either accept it as is or make amendments. So, I think to look for a vote of some kind and then tell the administration and city staff to move forward with our, direction kind of is in conflict with the day-to-day operations that is, that falls under the city administration's purview. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. School Board Member Jay.
I just want to circle back about the nurse situation that we were just discussing. I believe that we had approved to have a nurse at Burns. Was that just for interim for this remaining of the year? And are you talking about questioning what that looks like going forward?
Nope. So in the hierarchy, once you get into the contract, once you get into positions in the contract, nurses are their own position. Mm-hmm. So the nurse at Burns resigned. We have now posted that, and we have to post that open to anybody. So whoever's going to apply for that, if they get it, they will now they'll be the 3 nurses, because that's what we had originally in our budget. The 4th nurse that we had this year came out of ESSER funds. So the board will have to make a decision because the ESSER funds will not be there, as well as another position. They won't be it's not in the budget. So those are like we talked about the 3 positions Jody talked about. There's another 2 positions. One of them is the nurse. So that is a decision the board will have to make if they want to add a 4th nurse.
Okay, I guess I'm just referring to the fact that we had approved, I believe it was November 4th meeting for a nurse. So I guess that's where my confusion is coming in. We had a specific person that we approved.
Right. For that was the interim position. We had to
Okay,
post.
that's what I'm asking. Okay, so
Yep.
we have an interim now we're talking about in the future. Okay,
Right.
that's
Yep.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, School Board Member Shea. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a longtime observer to this process, I applaud the goals you've set out to create a more transparent and less adversarial procedure this year. But it seems like we have 2 goals. One is to provide clarity and guidance, and the other is to come up with the same number for both the city side and the school side. And it sounds like there are some different challenges to the city and the schools. The schools are coming in with a 6% increase in their labor costs and an unknown decrease in state funding, challenges that just aren't faced by the city side. And so whether or not we can come to the same number, I'd encourage us to still try and provide guidance to help reduce that adversarial nature and that we're all on the same page going forward.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Councilor Minthorn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So, Jason, if I understood you correctly, the 6% labor cost equates to about a 2.3% increase in the budget. Is that correct?
6% increase on the teacher side, correct. That's about 800,000. I'm estimating about approximately 200,000 for the other contracts, hourly employees as well. So that total of $1 million potential for contract increase is a 2.3% increase overall on our budget of the 42 million, correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, and City Administrator Cainrath, and Finance Director Salas, we're looking at approximately a 3% labor increase, but we have 5 contract unknowns as well going into the next year. So realistically, given those numbers, if we had to throw out a number tonight for everybody to kind of shoot for a target, do we think maybe 3.5 would be a good starting point? That would give about maybe a 0.5% on each side of wiggle room, not knowing all of our unknowns. And at least we've got a target then that we can kind of work toward. Just throwing that one out there, figure I'll get some feedback for sure.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Finance Director DiDonato, can you just refresh my memory here? I'm looking at the budget of the 42,463,384 number. How much, I don't have trying to do all the calculations here, but how much of that is locally paid versus a state subsidy?
Sure. So locally paid, it is 27.5 million. That was going to be my next question. When we talk about budgetary increases, are we talking about expenditures only? Are we talking about expenditures and revenue off of the mill rate increase? Because a 3% increase in expenditures could be great. It might be able to cover our labor costs as well as Thornton Academy potential increase. But if our shortfall's significant, we're still going to have a much larger increase on the mill. So that's always the question I have when we try to look for a directive of some sort without knowing the revenue side for the next, I don't know, month or probably 2 months at this point. I just look for clarification around that as well.
Thank you, Finance Director DiDonato. I just did some quick math based on the 27.5 and the 3.5% that Councilor Minthorn put out, and I came up with an increase in spending and local spending from the city in the amount of $962,500, almost that $1 million threshold that you talked about.
So if I were to do it over the expenditure side, I had 1.4 million increase in expenses. We did a 3.5%.
So I think the idea, Finance Director DiDonato, is much like with the city side. The council and the school board set the spending, and therefore, if we're looking at the number of what the local participation or local participating district is paying, and then that's what their spending is going to increase on, not both sides of the equation, not expenditures and revenues. So if you take the local $27 million, that's $27.5 million that the local side is paying, not what the state is paying, then that is the number increase. And then working within that number to make all the budgetary constraints work will be up to the individual school board. The board as a whole, just like the city council will be responsible for working through the city budget. But again, that's just throwing it out there for discussion. It's not set in stone. It's just a kind of a thought process here. Any further discussion? Councilor Purdy, you did have your hand up. Was your question answered?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. School Board Chair LaFortune.
I know we're getting close to the end of the year, and I'm just wondering if it's possible to meet on this topic more than just this evening. There are a couple of significant milestones that are on the horizon. One is the MAT number, and then, hoping that we got the ED 279 early, that would help inform the accuracy of a number that might be more palatable to everyone. And I see that the proposed schedule that we have really doesn't have us meeting again until March. The school board will definitely have several meetings between now and then, but I'm wondering if it's possible to slide in a meeting like this, sort of associated with one of those milestones, particularly the MAT one, which would allow us maybe to meet in January.
School Board Chair LaFortune, I don't see why there wouldn't be any reason why the two boards couldn't meet again. Just looking through the charter here, and it does say that we have to meet at certain times throughout the year. And that was a change in the charter in 2018. So, and I believe that next meeting would be in February. But there's nothing saying that the two boards can't get together of their own respective wills and make a meeting in January if that is the pleasure of both boards. Councilor McPhail and Councilor Johnston. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we also need to take into consideration is Jason said that the locally paid is roughly 27.5. But of course, we don't know where the state revenue sharing is going to fall as a decrease. That will increase the local because the local paid will have to be picked up by what the state is not paying. So going by that 27.5 until we have some even an estimate. I mean, we can say on the city, Glenn has stated that, you know, we're looking hopefully at 10%. Jason, do you have any possible estimated number of what the reduction could be?
No, I don't. They take all the data from all schools, and that's what they've been compiling. That's why it's important when we submit our financials as soon as we can to them, so they can compile all that data. Yeah. A couple other areas.
Roughly when does that usually come in? I know with the pandemic, it's hard and,
It's usually February.
Okay.
It's going to be beginning of February, but this year we're on, I believe it's the biannual budget. So it always tends, they drag it out a little bit longer because they're not sure what's going on with it. And then we could have additional adjustments to the final through April and May. A couple other areas too, the school board's got to look into as well when we're doing this is that, we cut areas such as all of our sports of 110,000. We cut all of our stipends for regular education. So we cut a lot of different things with the anticipation of the pandemic as well. So those are all, we definitely have a lot of work to do over the next couple weeks to review our budget and where the board wants to go.
right. And of course, looking forward to next year, hopefully those will be added back in.
Right.
They
Which
were
are
reduced
increases
this
to the
year, but we would like to hope that everything will be up and running by next fall. So those will be increases that are added back in as well. So
Right.
It's really hard for us to take in that 27.5, possibly estimating 30 or 31 at a minimum until we have that state revenue decrease.
Thank you, Councilor McPhail. That the area that I was talking about in the charter, for anyone that cares to look it up, is section 602, submission of budgets in the city charter. With that, Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I was just going to agree with Chair LaFortune. I certainly am not comfortable to give a number. I think there's too many unknowns presently, and I foresee several challenges on both the city and school side going forward. So I would just like to, meet again and say maybe mid-January, a month from now, and have some updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Finance Director Salas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is an opportunity. The school board and city council does need to meet together to accept the city auditor's report, which is, as I recall, usually the second Monday in January. So perhaps we could plan to meet again on this topic that evening when everyone would be together again as well. And that would give me some time to try and pull some maintenance of effort numbers.
Thank you, Finance Director Salas. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess I will we'll call it ditto Councilor Johnston's on not really being able to identify a percentage or a dollar figure today. However, I think I could put forth, not as a motion, but just my personal opinion is I think that all departments, the school and the city, should be looking at revenues conservatively and expenses conservatively. I think it's a little too mature at this point to try to come up with the numbers. I think it's just too difficult with so many moving targets. But I think if we can just come to the consensus that conservative revenues, conservative expenses on both sides, I think that will lead us to a more targeted approach. And I think, Mayor, that's what you're trying to do with this process, is come a little bit closer. And I think if we just generalize it in the sense of conservative this year, upcoming year, we can meet kind of the range that you're kind of looking for, or the January or February meeting, whatever is decided. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. Councilor Johnston.
I think my hand was up from before.
Finance Director Salas, was that your hand from before, or?
Yes, yeah, you can lower.
Thank you. Superintendent DePatsy, is there any update? It was asked there in a couple of public comments. Any update on where we are with the new school construction? I remember you gave a report maybe a month ago, stating that projects 4 and 5 were funded. Any additional updates at this time?
Nothing yet from Scott Brown, and that will be the first point of contact will be from him, and he will have us come up to the Department of Ed. It'll probably be the chair, myself, and Mike Garrity, and we will go through a whole preview of what we need to do step by step. So once we get that invite, then the process starts, but nothing as of yet.
Thank you, Superintendent DePatsy. Any further discussion? I don't see any counselors seeking recognition or school board members seeking recognition.
Mr. Mayor.
So it looks like we will not set a directive, but we will just agree to meet at a determined time in January or potentially February, and then maybe get an update on financials, and then maybe set a directive, maybe not. But at least we'll have some updates on some finance numbers.
Mr. Mayor.
City Administrator Cantor.
Thank you. Just for planning purposes, it sounds like Glennis had mentioned before, the date where we accept the auditor's report mid-January might be an opportunity for both boards to get together again. Is that, do you think, generally agreeable on both sides if we could try to come to some consensus now on our next meeting?
Any objection to that, I guess, is the easier one. Yeah. Is there any objection to that meeting? Hearing no objection, City Administrator Canrath, I think
we'll shoot for that.
That's a good plan.
Yeah. And we should have a pretty good idea where the school superintendent's budget will be somewhat by the 15th, I believe is, we're going to be discussing budget timeline in finance. And so we'll be, I believe at current right now is proposed for the 15th. So we should have some more concrete numbers for you by then.
Thank you, Finance Director DiDonato. Anything further on this item before we move on to the next item? The next item is legal training for council and school board. As school board members, you don't have to stay for this, but you're invited to stay. And this will be done by the city solicitor, Tim Murphy. So if we can promote Tim. Thank you. City Solicitor Tim Murphy, welcome and thank you for joining us this evening.
Sure, good evening. And I want to thank those brave souls who have stayed put and to listen to this, even though you're not necessarily obliged to do so. Couple quick points. I know you have a long agenda, so I'm going to try to be relatively brief. In particular, I've sent 2 emails, memos along to Tori early this morning, which summarize in large part what I am going through tonight. I'm just going to hit some highlights. So to the extent you need more data or more information, those memos are available to you. I might make a note. Welcome, Councilor Berman. Congratulations on your appointment. It's the first chance to speak to you, and welcome aboard. Second, aside from the fact that these memos exist and you can turn to them, I'd also note that to the extent, and I've said this in the past, when an ethical or legal question arises that causes you any doubt or concern, the city administrator is your primary point of reference and resource. They will, the city administrator will take the inquiry, and if there's a question that he, in consultation with the mayor, still have doubts about, then they'll run it over to me, and I'll be happy to take a look at it. But they're your primary resource. There's a lot of experience within those 2 offices to provide assistance. So don't fail to ask them. Typically, ethical issues arise for all of us during the course of any time in office. Sometimes ethical issues can be a little opaque and it's beneficial to have help. Other times they'll be fairly clear to you what's right and wrong, and you'll know what to do. But I'll talk more about ethics in a minute, but I just want to remind that there are resources out there to help you. And then ultimately this office as well, the city attorney's office, is available as well through the offices of the administrator. First, let me talk about the two most important things I think I can talk to anyone who's new to office, and to those of you who've been around. Some of you I know, for instance, Kevin LaFortune's staying with here in the meeting, has been around for a number of terms, so he'll be familiar with these. But the two key things for new government officials to be mindful of, both of some of these ethics rules that I'm going to talk about in a minute, and also Maine is a state that's governed by what's called FOA, or the Freedom of Access Act. We're all relatively familiar with it. But basically, the legislature has made it clear to us, and I'm actually going to read their verbiage. In Title I, Section 403, the legislature has said, except as otherwise provided by statute or by Section 405, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, all public proceedings must be open to the public, and any person must be permitted to attend a public proceeding. So the legislature is pretty clear. They want all things open to the public, except to the extent that they are specifically excluded, that the public is not allowed to participate. There are numerous Maine Supreme Court cases that, when interpreting this statute, the law court's been pretty clear. They will interpret that language broadly to allow public participation, public involvement in open meetings, and they will limit the restrictions very narrowly. In other words, the court knows the legislature favors openness. So generally, to the extent when we need to, we're going to err on the side of something should be open, something should be visible to the public, because that seems to be where the legislature's told us to go. And also that's the way the courts are interpreting that legislation. So the court errs on the side of openness. Typically, you're all probably very familiar with those areas where you're going to go into executive session. There's nothing wrong. Executive sessions are allowed. The legislature sees the wisdom of them, but they are, again, by statute, confined to a limited number of areas. So, for example, labor negotiations, employee and employee disciplinary matters, purchasing of real estate, consultation with your lawyers. These are cases where the injury to the school board or to the city can occur if those discussions to become prematurely public and made known. So there are times and places where, and the legislature said it's perfectly appropriate to go into executive session. In other words, to not do your business before the public. You all know there are mechanisms for how you get into executive session. You need a certain number of people to agree to do it. And what's oftentimes very important is you're only allowed to do executive session business that you've designated. So for instance, if you go in to discuss legal matter, say there's a pending lawsuit. I'm happy to report, by the way, there are no pending lawsuits that I'm aware of, which is good news. But if you go in to talk to the attorney about a pending lawsuit, while you're in the midst of an executive session, you can't decide to talk about that teacher down the hall you don't like, or someone at Public Works who tipped over your trash can and you're angry and you want them disciplined. Okay, executive session is limited to the topic you go in for. So it's not a free range opportunity to vent grievances. You're not to vote on make determinations in executive session. You can get a consensus of where you stand, but ultimately, if you take action, you have to do that outside of executive session. So for instance, if you're buying real estate, you will come out of executive session and you will say, we are interested in the most recent case, selling 351 North Street, the old Public Works building. And we're going to instruct the city administrator to enter into a purchase and sale agreement to sell that building to a buyer for, in this case, $2.3 million. So that was a subject that was rightly the subject of executive session, but once the decision was made, it can be announced in public. Nothing wrong with that, but that's essentially the process of executive session. So the state favors us doing things openly and transparently. No surprise there. Executive sessions, there are some other additional statutory reasons that are require confidentiality. But the typical ones are listed in section 405, which is the executive session statute. It's important to remember that the public meeting is based on the body. And so typically we think of the body as council meets on Monday night. That's the body. When it gets there, in the old days, pre-COVID, we went to City Hall. And when you got together there at the dais in the front, that was your meeting. Well, that's how we think of it. And I'm not sure, I think the school board meets on Tuesdays. So it would be the same thing, wherever you were meeting, and it may have been down at 90 Beach Street, down here, that was your meeting. What you need to actually think of meeting as a more expansive concept. It's not simply when you're in the hall together. So if you have any three of you meeting in a facility, so if three counselors sit down with the city administrator to discuss a pressing city matter, that arguably becomes a public meeting. So when you have a sufficient number of the body meeting, you can inadvertently become or trigger the public meeting access rules. So that's something typically the mayor and the city administrator are very mindful of. I'm sure the same is true with the superintendent and the superintendent's legal counsel. I'm sure that they are also mindful of those on the school board side. It gets a little less clear, not only these meetings. So for instance, three of you meeting at the Golden Rooster, that's arguably going to be a meeting. It gets even more opaque when three of you are communicating via your emails. And if you get a large enough email chain going where people are amongst themselves interacting on a matter of public interest, that can arguably arise to the level of what is a public meeting and what might or should have been noticed. So you may be exposing inadvertently cities to claims by citizens that something was kept from them, that it was not public. So we always need to be mindful, is this proceeding, have we reached a threshold where we need to be doing this openly? An adjunct to the open meeting, public meeting part of the FOA and the twin to the public aspect of the FOA is that records that are produced by government in its day-to-day operations are themselves also subject to transparency requirements, that the citizens can review them. Councilor Johnson, I'm triggering your funny bone, it looks like. So that'll be the first time anyone says that about public records, by the way. So in this case, citizens can make requests. They're not entitled to unlimited access to government records. Some records are themselves akin to executive session, can be withheld from citizens. And a request can reach a point where it is so large that we are able to say to the citizen, well, you need to pay us a certain amount of money because there's going to be a large amount of staff time involved with this. I believe the city clerk is the gatekeeper in the city for FOA requests. So when they come in, it's her responsibility to assess the size and scope of the FOA request. Will it require more than an hour or two of staff time to produce the records? Oftentimes, lawyers now use FOA as a means to get records to help their legal claims, particularly in planning board cases. We see that done all the time, and in some lawsuits. it is not unusual that I'll be asked to look at records to make sure that we're not inadvertently disclosing something that we're not supposed to. For all of you, the most important thing to think about government records is you probably all assume on a day-to-day basis that you're not holding any. So, you know, maybe you got a council packet, or you got a school board equivalent of what we're going to discuss tonight. There may be some financial records that Jason has provided or that Glenn Salas has provided. There may be a memo by a staff member explaining something, and you think, well, those are the only government records I ever see, and I'll throw them away. And there's nothing to them. It's more than that. Those aren't the kind of records that you really need to worry about. Those are easily accessible and easily provided to those parties who are interested in them. The records that you may not be thinking about and you should think about are your own emails. So when you email anything related to your role in government, whether it's school board or the city, that's going to be called, pardon my air quotes, official business or government business. Because it's government or official business, that email is now discoverable. That email is in essence a document, and it can be asked for by a party that has an interest in it. Now, if that email is on your personal phone, your personal iPad, your personal communications device, whatever it may be, you can find that you're obliged to produce those records. This can be very important because oftentimes we may communicate with just one member of the council or one member of the school board, and we may say something like, I'll give you a real life example that we had here in the city. Someone described an individual citizen as a wascally wabbit, that they were not nefarious, but just shy of it. That terminology as to this citizen came out in court, and it had to be explained. Why were we calling a citizen a wascally wabbit? That was an uncomfortable position for me to have to go to the court and explain. And truth wasn't a defense in that case, although you don't want your emails necessarily to be out there. So while you may not think of them as a traditional government record, I want you to at least be mindful that the possibility exists that they could become a government record, that they could be disclosed. And there have been attorneys in the past who, when they file FOA requests to us, expressly say, we want all emails, even if they are on your personal device. So that is the good and the bad of FOA, is that our citizens are so much better informed, and we want that. We all want an informed, educated citizens so that government can succeed in its mission, and because they help us. Ultimately, a well-informed public helps us do a better job. But we have to be mindful that if there's a moment of frustration, or we're home on the weekends and we're seeing something crossing social media or in the newspaper that we like or don't like, and we just do this thing with the fingers. I don't ever partake in social media. I've never tweeted. I've never texted. I don't even know how to text. But most of you probably do. And so you're going to be tempted to say, look what that jackass is doing. You know, can you believe it? Holy moly. That potentially can come out, and it can embarrass you. It can embarrass the school board. It can embarrass the city, and can jeopardize potentially a matter that you're interested in and involved in. Now, on the lawsuit side, it's never caused us adverse effect. We've been able to explain things, how they've happened, and show that there was no harm. But there have been other cities where that hasn't been the case. And some people feel very uncomfortable when their personal devices start being investigated because they may have some government business on them. So to the extent you can, use your government issued device for your government conduct, keep a personal device to yourself, and just use it for personal emails or personal social media. Also be mindful that the internet never sleeps, it never rests, and the internet never forgets. Things can be cleaned up after the fact, but they can also be recorded and discovered. So social media it's got a lot of good things about it. I understand that, but it can be used against you. You're all public figures now. So people are interested in what you say. They'll be really interested in if you do something that, advances something they're interested in or impedes something they don't want to see succeed. So people will use these things against you if you give them the opportunity. Two of my partners here in family law, and it will come as no surprise how many cases we have now where spouses are admitting evidence in the courts of the other spouse's conduct based on what we see in emails and social media. So courts are open. They're used to seeing this evidence now, and they will be happy to accept it and look at it. So emails and your texts and your social media are open records if you're talking or involved with something that is part of your business on the school board or the city. So please be mindful of that. It's a self-preservation thing. And that's why I do this. A lot of the city council have heard me do this soapbox before. And so they know how I feel about this, that my job is to generally try to keep us out of trouble. And this is one area where it can happen pretty quick. So I encourage you all to be mindful that view those emails as essentially government records. And don't give someone an opportunity to undercut you. I mean, you worked hard to get in the positions you have. The citizens chose you because they believe in you. They think you're the best people to do the job. And so you bear that responsibility. And if something happens and you're not able to be reelected, you're going to look back and go, geez, why did I do that? And we don't want that. So again, to the extent you have questions on any of this open access, and there's a lot to it. I'm just trying to give you the two big kind of high points. Please seek out either the school board's counsel, or myself through the city administrator. The last thing I want to talk about, specifically tonight, is ethics. These are probably FOA and ethics are probably the two most important things you're going to confront. There's a state statute which is referenced in the material I sent, and it applies to us as well. The city is a subdivision of the state, so oftentimes a lot of state rules, state laws apply to the city as a subdivision of the state. And this law is Title 30A, Section 2605. And essentially, what it says is councilors and public officials will not vote or act in matters where they have a direct or indirect financial interest. In other words, they don't want a self-dealing. If you own a piece of real estate that maybe the city is interested in buying, well, clearly you're self-interested. You should never participate in such a thing, ever. Not even close, not even a close call. So there may be a school board equivalent too. So it's something like that, where it can be argued that you were not doing something for the public good. You were doing it because you had a financial or personal interest in the matter. Now, both the city has an equivalent provision in its city charter that would govern all of you, and it somewhat mirrors the state. Both the state statute and the city charter provision have a 10% safe harbor rule. And what that means is that if your direct or indirect financial interest is less than 10%, to the company you own is less than 10%, you're less than a 10% shareholder of the company that's bidding, or you're less than a 10% owner of a piece of land that the city's buying, that somehow that isolates you from the potential harm, and you're not bound by the ethical requirements of these two statutes. My suggestion is you ignore that 10% rule. It may be that, yes, you're technically not violating state law, or you're technically not violating the charter because you're only a 10% stockholder. And you can say, hey, I'm within the safe harbor. The public isn't going to care about that. It's still not going to look right. You're far better off abstaining from a matter. And the best process is, if you think you have a connection to something, my wife works here, or my brother works there, or my spouse works over here, or they're involved in such and such a matter. The best thing you can do is disclose it. So if you disclose it to your fellow school board members or your fellow counselors, let them assess if in fact they think it's a conflict. If they think you have some interest that requires you to step down from the matter, they may say, we're not worried, or you can abstain. But disclosing creates, the word I use is like, it's like an inoculation. Transparency inoculates you from the perceived harm, because by explaining what the problem or the situation is to out in an open public meeting, you haven't hidden anything. You've brought it to your peers, the people on the body, and if they're comfortable with your disclosure, then a subsequent vote, if it's in favor of what you were looking at, you're totally inoculated, because you had no participation in the matter. You disclosed it, didn't have participation in it, and independent of you, the body voted for it. So that becomes like an inoculation, and you're likely well covered from any adverse effect of that vote. Typically, some ethical issues can be a bit opaque, not clear, but others are abundantly clear. And they don't require a whole lot of soul searching. You know when you're doing something wrong. That little voice inside you will tell you when you're doing something wrong. You don't need me. You know. When you hear that or feel that or you sense that voice, stop. Don't do it. Go ask somebody, but chances are it's probably not the best step to take. You can actually reach a point where an ethical lapse could morph into, God forbid, and it does for some people, an actual criminal violation. The state has a series of statutes which make certain actions, while not only unethical, are actually criminal. And so you never want to end up there. The reason is juries will have no sympathy for public officials who commit a crime. It's one thing to be confused about an ethical issue, but if you didn't ask for advice and you turned around and offered money to somebody for a favor, you're going to find yourself in some hot water. So you certainly don't want to go down that road. As a city, I can tell you in my years here, we've been quite fortunate. We've had outstanding public officials who well understood their roles and did not even get near that line. We had one code enforcement officer in the past who was bribed. He immediately brought that attempted bribe to the city, and then it was immediately brought to the FBI, and then it was subsequently investigated, with the city acting as a cooperating witness to secure the arrest of the individual who had been making the bribe. So that's the city's history. It's been a good one. And I'm sure the same will be the case for all of you. I've never had reason to lose sleep with this city. It's just not been part of our past. And I don't envision it being a part of the future here either. But again, an ounce of prevention. So if there are situations that arise and you have questions, seek out either the school board's own attorney, or you can ask me. I'm a resource, or the city administrator, who's worked both here at the local level, and I should also note, has worked at the state level. So again, there's a large reservoir of in-house institutional knowledge about these ethical obligations. But typically, my guess is all of you are going to well understand when you're near that line and you should disclose. Again, try to avoid even the appearance of a conflict. Sometimes, I will tell you, the appearance can be worse to people than an actual conflict itself, because it leaves them wondering, well, how bad is it? What isn't this person telling me? Are they making money on this? Is this somehow inappropriate? So even the appearance of a conflict can be troubling to the public. So I recommend, if there's any question, seek out advice. That's what we're here for. I'm happy to report that I was working with Emily Roy earlier, I want to say perhaps mid-November or so, on a city ethical code. For years, we've been talking about an aspirational guide, sort of a statement of what we expect from the city team, city employees, city elected officials, some clear guidance, because the charter, frankly, hasn't been exactly clear as to what were the governing standards. We had these sort of vague statements about direct and indirect influence. But Emily's done an excellent job of helping to put together, with the city administrator's help, an ethics policy for the city, so that we'll have a firm guide for you that you can turn to and use as a resource. My guess is most of them, they're already going to be things you're comfortable with or already know about and do anyway as part of your lives. So again, as I say, I'm not losing sleep about any of you, nor would I have your predecessors either, because all of you are well informed. You wouldn't have been elected if there was any question in the public side. So, but as you go on in your career here at both the school board and city council, you're going to be presented with challenges where something will arise. Perfect. Is my brother's business benefiting because we're going to do the plowing up at the, Young School or something like that? Who knows? But it'll be something like that that we can anticipate, but presents a question. And there are those of us who are ready to help. So the ethics code is on the way, and I'll just end with this point. So both the FOA law, the open meeting, open records law, and these rules about ethics, they flow from essentially one source. Our government is really largely based upon a concept of due process, of fairness. You see it throughout a lot of the statutes. You particularly see it through this open meeting law. Why do they do this? Why is transparency so important? It's because due process is important. We want the public to know what's going on. We want to hear from them. We want them to understand that how their public elected officials are serving them. These and the rules of ethics as well stem from this idea that you, the elected officials, owe the public a duty. You're stewards. There's a responsibility. And all of that flows from this generic base concept in both the federal and the state constitution of due process, of providing the citizens with both responsible government and government based on a set of defined rules that we all know and we all follow. It's one of the blessings here about local government. It's something we can all kind of get our hands around and manage and understand. And so to the extent you see that if you think fairness is being violated, and it's really important because it's kind of our guide stone. We have to have these processes in place. We follow them. We try to do it faithfully. And in large part, in most cases, we always do. And that's for both bodies, the school board and the city. Certainly I can say on the city side. But don't lose sight of that underlying governing principle of fairness and due process is what guides and should always guide the large part of what you do. It's the base obligation we owe the citizens, and it's really the base obligation of how you're going to conduct yourself. transparency and openness are the cousins of due process. So I'm sorry to I know you've had a long night, so I kind of wanted to scamper through a lot of this and hit just the high points. But I said these are laid out in the memos I sent through Tori. I'm certainly happy to answer any question I can tonight, and I'm always available as a resource. So if I can, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, City Solicitor Tim Murphy. Any questions for Tim? Okay, no questions. Thank you, Tim.
You're
School
welcome,
board, again, as Tim reiterated, your process is a little different. You would go through Superintendent DePatsy to contact your legal counsel, which, and then you could go into executive session. But if there's no further questions, we will move on. Again, City Solicitor Murphy, thank you for joining us this evening. School board members, thank you for joining us, and also thank you for staying for the legal training. I'll be brief. It's important stuff because it can save from lawsuits and litigation and just problems along the way. So, but thank you all. Have a great evening. Those that want to stick around with the school board, here, feel free to do so. Okay. At this moment in time, we are at item E on the agenda, which was item D, but now it's item E, public hearing, amendments to Chapter 211. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of the implementation for the new online parking ticket and permit software, the police department identified that parking fees were entered into ordinance and conflicted with the approved fee schedule. This revision reserves council authority to levy fines for parking violations, but leaves the specific amounts to the fee schedule, which is approved by council annually. Punitive late fine, which is double the ticket amount if not paid within 5 days, is also removed and reserved instead for the fee schedule. Some other revisions have been also made to designate municipal parking lots throughout the city and to enable the changes to parking permits that will take effect January 1st, 2021. Public Works, Police, and the City Solicitor have all been given the chance to review and add their edits. Staff recommends approval. I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn to open the public hearing, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on open the public hearing. Seeing no councilor seeking recognition, no hands raised. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. To open the public hearing at 9:03 p.m. If there's anyone who would like to speak before the city council on item E, which is a public hearing amendments to Chapter 211, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform, and you'll be unmuted to speak to the council again. Those that wish to speak on this matter before the council, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9. Seeing no hands raised and nobody seeking recognition, Councilor Gunn.
I move to close the public hearing and hereby schedule the second and final reading of amendments to Chapter 211 for January 4th, 2021.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn, second by Councilor Minthorn. Any discussion on closing the public hearing and setting the final reading on January 4th? See no hands raised, no councilor seeking recognition. Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, everyone. We are now at item F of the agenda, and that is a second final reading on the Long Range Planning Committee. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor William Doyle is seeking to create a new committee for the city of Saco that will be named the Long Range Planning Committee, LRPC. The discussion on establishing the LRPC was held at the City Council meeting November 2nd, 2020. The newly formed LRPC will serve as an advisory committee to the Saco City Council, and its charge will be to oversee the city's long-term vision for the city by studying and making recommendations on managing the city's future growth and development, assessing zoning and land use initiatives, growth management initiatives, environmental efforts, and updates to the comprehensive plan. The establishment of the LRPC is in line with the State of Maine's Growth Management Act, Section 4324, Responsibility for Growth Management, Articles 1 and 2. This act was enacted in 1989, and Saco, like most larger Maine municipalities, has adopted growth management comprehensive plans that establish rural and growth areas and incorporate the major elements of a growth management comprehensive plan. Inventory and analysis, policies, and implementation plans, including zoning ordinances and amendments, and contemplates the establishment of a planning committee to oversee the preparation and amendment of a growth management comprehensive plan and obtain public input as required by state law in the preparation and amendment of a comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance. It is the mayor's and city staff recommendation that the LRPC serve that role for developing the comprehensive plan and in turn oversee accountability for its implementation. Copy of Articles 1 and 2 of the Maine Growth Management Act is attached, and the provision to authorize that appointment of a planning committee are highlighted. Initially, the LRPC will be tasked with reviewing the 2011 comprehensive plan and the 2018 comprehensive plan update with city staff and outside consultants. To develop the 2021 comprehensive plan, together, this group will provide advice and guidance throughout this public engagement process. Anticipated to take 18 months to complete. In particular, the committee's work will focus on zoning and land use with the goals of effective growth management, responsible economic development, carefully considered infrastructure improvements, improving Saco's stature as a desirable community in which to live, work, and raise a family. The LRPC will then shift its focus from the development of the Comprehensive Plan 2021 to the implementation of the Comprehensive Plan and to ensure that City Council, Planning Board, City staff, annual fiscal year and tax increment financing budgets, capital plans, policies, and other critical initiatives reflect the vision and intention of the Comprehensive Plan 2021. Together with city staff, the LRPC will be responsible for documenting and developing an annual reporting tool to the City Council that will report out of the implementation of the Comprehensive Plan. The LRPC composition will consist of the following: 2 city councilors, 2 planning board members, 2 economic development commission members, 2 Saco staff designated by the superintendent, the Saco Main Street executive director or designee, age-friendly Saco coordinator or designee, 5 Saco residents, and the city staff will include the city planner, director of planning and economic development specialist, deputy assessor, city engineer, Director of Code Enforcement, and the initial LRPC members' terms will be all for the 3-year term commencing December 14th of 2020 and ending December 2023. Subsequent terms will be for the 3 years for city councilors, city boards and committees, Saco schools, Saco Main Street, age-friendly Saco, and for staggered 3, 2, and 1 year terms for the citizens. The recommendation is to decommission the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee for the Comprehensive Plan 2018 update that was established in October of 2016. Their charge was to respond to one of the City Council's goals by the Saco City Council to review the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinances for discrepancies, assimilate the Bridge 2025 document, and make recommendations for changes to the document for the next calendar year. That committee has served its role and is no longer needed. Amend the City Code Chapter 4, Section 4-34 and 4-38. Refer to Exhibit 2 for amendments to the City Code Chapter 4, Section 4-34, Planning Board, and to Section 4-38, Long Range Planning Committee. The second and final reading is to vote A, to create a new committee named the Long Range Planning Committee, LRPC. 2, to decommission the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee for the Comprehensive Plan 2018 update. And 3, amend the City Code Chapter 4, Section 4-34, Planning Board, and Section 4-38, Long Range Planning Committee. I move to have the second and final reading and vote to 1, create the new city committee and name it the Long Range Plan Committee. 2, decommission the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee for the Comprehensive Plan 2018 update. And 3, amend the City Code Chapter 4, Section 4-34, Planning Board, and Section 4-38, Long Range Planning Committee as outlined in Exhibit 2.
Second.
A motion's been made by Councilor McPhail, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on the second and final reading of this matter. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Earlier today, when I was reviewing this, it occurred to me there's a lot going on here in this motion. And it's always been at least a practice, to my knowledge, that when crafting motions or bringing items forward, it's always only contained one subject matter. And reviewing the charter, it's also stated that under Section 2.08 procedure, that all actions the City Council shall act only by ordinance, order, or resolve. All ordinance, orders, and resolves, except those pertaining to appropriation, shall be confined to one subject, which shall be clearly expressed in this title. Yet here we're adding to the City Code, decommissioning a current committee and amending the City Code. I don't know if this was reviewed by legal counsel, and again, I'm not adverse to any of these actions. I'm just concerned moving forward that we follow the charter, for one, and 2, we are setting a precedent where this becomes a normality, I guess. I for one like to be able to look back through the history and be able to strategically find what action occurred as to how we got to where we are. And I think when you add this many actions into one motion is problematic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Councilor Archer.
Yes, I'll just to clean it up, I'll make a motion to divide. That's pretty much makes this motion 3 motions. That's, I believe, in this case, the simplest form.
Councilor Archer has made a motion to divide the 3 into 3 separate motions, even though they were put forth together in the previous public hearing and previous first reading. But for now, the second reading, we can take it as independent motions, as Councilor Archer has indicated. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
So the motion's been made by Councilor Archer, second by Councilor Berman, on taking these individual items, item 1, 2, and 3, and then voting on them separately. So therefore, any discussion on that? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. It certainly seems like an easier way of cleaning it up, but I would say going forward that these should be 3 separate items on future agendas when you have a situation like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Any further discussion on this? Seeing no further discussion and no councilor seeking recognition, roll call vote on separating item 1, 2, and 3 from one motion into 3 separate motions. Roll call vote, Councilor Archer,
Aye.
Councilor Purdy,
Yes.
Councilor Gunn,
No.
Councilor Gunn. I did not record a.
Sorry, I think I glitched for a second. No.
Thank you. Councilor Berman,
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn,
No.
Councilor McPhail,
Yes.
and Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2. So as amended, item 1, that is create a new city committee named the Long Range Planning Committee, or LRPC. Is there a motion for number 1?
So moved.
Councilor Johnston. Is there a second for item 1?
Second.
Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on item 1, or item F1, I should say. Seeing no discussion and no councilor seeking recognition on F1. Roll call vote, Councilor Archer,
Aye.
Councilor Purdy,
Yes.
Councilor Gunn,
Yes.
Councilor Berman,
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn,
Yes.
Councilor McPhail,
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. On item F2, is to decommission the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee for the Comprehensive Plan 2018 update. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Councilor Minthorn, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion on the motion?
Oh. Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Johnston.
I'd just like to quickly thank everybody that was involved in that process.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call vote on item F2. Councilor Archer,
Aye.
Councilor Purdy,
Yes.
Councilor Gunn,
Yes.
Councilor Berman,
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn,
Yes.
Councilor McPhail,
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. On item F3, is there a motion to amend the city code, chapter 4, section 434 and 438?
So moved.
Councilor Minthorn, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Discussion? See no councilor seeking recognition and no discussion. A roll call vote on section F3. Councilor Archer,
Aye.
Councilor Purdy,
Yes.
Councilor Gunn,
Yes.
Councilor Berman,
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn,
Yes.
Councilor McPhail,
Yes.
and Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. That takes care of item F. Item G, which is one reading, adoption of the Code of Ethics, Code of Conduct, City. Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city of Saco is committed to the highest ethical standards and practices, protecting employees, partners, volunteers, elected and appointed officials, vendors, and the organization from unethical, illegal, or damaging actions and statements by individuals, either knowingly or unknowingly. When the city of Saco acts in an ethical manner, addresses issues proactively, and uses best business judgment and practices, it establishes a positive reputation and protects the public or the interests of our citizens. This policy will serve as to guide behavior and to ensure ethical conduct throughout the city government, operations, and in municipal facilities. Effective ethics is a team effort involving the participation and support of every City of Saco employee, as well as all appointed and elected officials. All committee members and employees should familiarize themselves with the ethics guidelines as described in the Code of Ethics/Conduct. This policy was reviewed by legal counsel on October 23rd, 2020. Feedback was incorporated into the revised version following the council discussion during new business on November 30th, 2020. Be it authorized that the City Council adopt the Code of Ethics/Conduct dated December 8th, 2020.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Discussion? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank the city administrator, Mr. Kane Rath, and Emily Roy, communications director, for addressing the issues that I presented last week. They were able to incorporate them to my satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Any further discussion? Seeing no councilors seeking recognition, no hands raised. One reading on the adoption of Code of Ethics/Conduct. Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. We are now at item H. What was item G, a first reading and set the public hearing on the amendments to zoning ordinance, zoning map, site plan review ordinance, subdivision ordinance for January 4th, 2021. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Beginning in October 2018, the City of Saco established a zoning ordinance revision committee that began working with city staff and consultants on a comprehensive zoning ordinance revision. After extensive public outreach, public meetings, work session, a new zoning ordinance, zoning map, site plan, and subdivision ordinances were developed. City Council held a public hearing on these ordinances and the zoning map on November 4th, 2019. After hearing from the public and recognizing that additional areas need to be addressed, the City Council voted to send the zoning ordinance, zoning map, site plan, and subdivision ordinances back to the Planning Board for further review. The Planning Board and the Zoning Ordinance Revision Steering Committee then continued working together at joint workshops and Planning Board meetings to work through additional drafts of the revised zoning ordinance, zoning map, subdivision, and site plan ordinance with city staff. Public hearing was held on October 20th, 2020, and it was decided to continue the public hearing through December 1st, 2020, when the public hearing was then closed. Planning Board voted unanimously at the December 1st, 2020 meeting to approve the Planning Board report and to submit that report to the City Council. At the same meeting, the Planning Board voted unanimously to approve the zoning ordinance, site plan, and subdivision ordinances and zoning map and send to City Council for the review. City Council heard the presentation by the city planner on the zoning ordinances, site plan, and subdivision ordinances and zoning map at the December 14th, 2020 meeting. In addition, the mayor and council were advised of a couple of primary issues of inconsistency between the 2011 comprehensive plan and the new zoning ordinance as voted upon by the planning board. The R5 MU, currently the MU4 zone, was removed from the zoning ordinance. The use master plan development was also removed from both the R5 MU and Portland Road districts within the zoning ordinance. Please see Attorney Jim Katavikis's and City Planner Bob Hamlin's memos. Several exhibits. Staff recommends that the City Council approve the first reading for the amendments to the zoning ordinance, zoning map, site plan review ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and set the public hearing on January 4th, 2020. I move to approve the first reading and set the public hearing on the amendments to the zoning ordinance, zoning map, site plan review ordinance, subdivision ordinance for January 4th, 2020. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion on the first reading and setting the public hearing for January 4th. Or questions for city staff regarding the amendments presented? Planning and Economic Development Director Denise Clavette, do you want to provide any commentary for the council?
At this point, I think all of the information has been presented. We had a presentation at the last meeting, and so unless there are specific questions, clearly we're in support of moving this forward to a public hearing on January 4th, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. City Planner Hamlin?
Yes. I would echo Economic Development Director Clavette's sentiments. I would reiterate my offer if there are councilors, and certainly yourself, Mr. Mayor, who have any questions or would seek clarification for any of what are obviously hundreds of pages of changes to our zoning, site plan, and subdivision ordinances, please feel free to contact myself or other staff. We'd be glad to discuss.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Okay, seeing no hands raised and no councilors seeking recognition, a roll call vote on the first reading and setting the public hearing for January 4th. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. That item will be back before us on the 4th. With that brings us to new business. We have two items on the agenda tonight. Item A is a pilot agreement with the Bedford Housing Authority, and item B is a market analysis presentation. Council, given that it is 9:30 and we're not due to take new business on after 9:30, is there any objection to going beyond the 9:30 deadline? I'm not hearing an objection. Is the council comfortable with moving forward, or would you rather a vote on whether to proceed beyond the rules guideline of 9:30? Okay. Councilor Johnston?
I was just going to say, I always prefer a vote, but if there's consensus.
Are you interested in making a motion, Councilor Johnston?
Sure. I make a motion to suspend council's rules and move beyond 9:30.
Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston, second by, is that Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion. The motion is to suspend the rule regarding the no new business after 9:30. Hearing no counselor seeking recognition, no hands raised. Roll call vote on that motion. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes. That was a yes.
Thank you. Counselor Minthorn?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. We are now at item A of new business, a pilot agreement with Biddeford Housing Authority. City Administrator Canrath, who will be giving the presentation on this evening.
Thank you. We have available Isabel Exley from our planning department, who has been the point person on this. We also have Tim Murphy, I believe, available for legal questions. His opinion on this matter is included in your packet for review. So if there are any questions on the legal end, Tim is also available.
Thank you. Greetings and welcome, Isabel. Welcome back, Tim. Isabel, is there anything you would like to say to the council regarding this, or just want to answer questions?
I'll keep it brief since it's getting to be a late night for you all. So I just wanted to point out that back a couple of months ago, you all had authorized the city to enter into purchase and sale negotiations for an RFP response with Biddeford Housing Authority for the sale of 90 Temple Street in the amount of $1,000. And we have been working on those negotiations since then. Also during that meeting, a question was raised about whether Biddeford Housing would actually pay property taxes since they are a nonprofit. We, as usual, I turned to the experts. So I asked for Tim Murphy's opinion on that, which was provided, as well as some other things that council should be aware of. All of that was provided in a memo from both me and Tim, and one from Tim Murphy in your meeting packet. The final thing I'll point out is that 90 Temple Street, sort of time is of the essence with this one. 90 Temple Street, as we all are aware, experienced a fire in 2012 and has since been left open to the elements. Every time the snow flies, I start to get a little bit nervous and I take a walk over there to check on it, make sure it's okay. Biddeford Housing is requesting this pilot agreement because of the substantial cost to rehabilitate the building, and also because they are providing some benefits in this case, including below market rate housing and a unit for use by the city's general assistance office, as was discussed the last time this was before you all. But as Tim Murphy pointed out in his memo, there are a lot of considerations that need to be discussed. So we're just here to answer any questions, sort of provide some clarity here. And I would like some clarity from you all about how you would like to move forward on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Tim, anything for the council to consider?
So the decision whether to enter into a pilot is purely a policy decision for all of you. It's not for me. I will execute whatever policy objective all of you decide you want us to follow. I know Isabel's doing the same thing. So we will execute on what you want. There are other properties in the city that are rented at below market rates. Some of those are owned by nonprofits, and so we do have the issue of a consistency and whether we are treating some parcels differently. That being said, there may be reasons because of the unique nature of this property where you can kind of straight face it, because it is, I mean, it's a building that's on the verge of falling apart. So, or it's something you can instruct the administrator to further negotiate on. But whatever you decide, I certainly will be happy to accomplish it in terms of the legal documents.
Thank you, Tim. Councilor Archer.
Yes, this is for Tim. Did you draft this? I see nothing about any type of clauses about transferability. I just want to, if possible, can we just be clear that if this property is sold, it goes back onto the tax rolls. It's not against BHA, it's just I see nothing about it getting back on. And sometimes clarity is the best tool in the future.
The document was drafted by Biddeford Housing. We've had no say on that.
Okay.
We didn't push back on it. So we haven't considered tweaking it yet.
Okay, so yeah, I just, if possible, if we can add, again, it's more for clarity. It's not really to change this document, but if Biddeford Housing sells any of these properties that are potential, this one or potential others in Saco, that it's clear that it doesn't go to the next owner. Even if that owner happens to be a nonprofit, this is a deal between us and this entity, is how I look at it.
Okay.
And it's just not written in there, and I figured make it nice and clear that it's not transferable. Other than that, I'm okay with it.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Mayor.
Councilor Archer. Thank you. Council, Guy Gagnon, the Executive Director for Biddeford Housing Authority, has his hand raised. Is there any objection to bringing him forward for any type of information? I see no objection being raised. City Administrator Canrath, did you have something? I
I
apologize.
did. I just wanted to point out, in case everyone didn't catch this also, that this proposed agreement is not limited to just 90 Temple Street, but is sort of being called a master agreement for all properties. So this is not just for 90 Temple Street. I just want to make sure that's clear on the table also.
Thank you, City Administrator Canrath. Mr. Gagnon from Biddeford Housing Authority, welcome, greetings. You're on mute, so we cannot hear you at this moment. But you had your hand up, so we're bringing you forward to.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi. Just a couple points. Actually, the city manager just had one of my points cleared up. The pilot is basically for all projects that we would do in the city of Saco. And we did note that in the proposal under the budget item, operating budget, that a pilot would be part of that. So it's not, I just wanted to make that clear. So once again, the pilot is not really related to this project. So it's really related to anything that's done. Just for clarification also, Biddeford Housing is a quasi-municipal agency, which is a different form of nonprofit. Our mission is to create housing. So I know in Tim's memo, he talked about having a mission related to whether a nonprofit is taxable and whether what they're doing is related to their mission. Our mission is housing. So I don't think there's any issue with that. And the other point I wanted to make is some of the other groups that have other multifamily properties, I think you'll find they may be operated by nonprofits, but they actually might be owned by for-profit development. As far as some of those other ones, like I don't know exactly, which ones he's talking about. He mentioned Ledgewood and so forth. They might need to dig more into it, and those are definitely not owned by a housing authority, which is a different class of nonprofit. So I just wanted to make that clear. And the whole point of the pilot agreement, from our point of view and our experience with it, with the city of Biddeford, is going forward. One, it shows it's easier for us to budget. In fact, a lot of housing authorities in the state pay zero taxes, and we're kind of offering the pilot as a good faith effort to at least give the city some financial taxes out of every project that we do, but having it to be a predictable number so that these difficult projects are able to go forward and and be predictable, have a predictable budget, which is very, very important for these types of projects. I guess that's it for now.
Thank you, Executive Director Gagnon. Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thanks. I do have a couple of questions, including one following up right on that. I'm looking at section 1B of the pilot document, and you had talked about housing authorities or other nonprofits, but the property really being owned by a for-profit company. How does that compare with the situation that's being proposed here in 1B, where the Biddeford Housing Authority is a general partner, but the ownership might be greater than 50% by a for-profit company? That seems to be the situation you're describing. I'm wondering if somebody can explain how that works.
Executive Director Gagnon, can you explain that? Thank you.
So our property B is, I don't know how familiar you all are with tax credit development. So for instance, I'm not sure if actually there was the project down behind the train station on the river. That was a tax credit development. So, and I don't think there was a nonprofit involved in that. I could be wrong. But usually what happens is the nonprofit ends up owning 1/10 of 1%, and the tax credit side, which is how they generate credit for a project that has to be owned by a for-profit. So 99.9% of it is owned by the for-profit in that case. So those are tax credit type of projects. In that case, that's what the proposal is, to pay a little bit more than taxes in those types of situations. The reality is it's not much different in the way they operate. They're still operated by the nonprofit. It's a pretty complicated ownership structure. I don't know if that explains anything, but
yeah, thank
Councilor Berman, does that?
Yeah, that helps. I have a follow-up question for Solicitor Murphy also. You talked about the unique nature of this property, maybe mitigating against the concerns about equity for different projects. But as this is a master agreement, we really can't take the unique aspects of this property into account, right?
Well, you can if we structure the pilot so that it only applies to this one property, then it's easily resolved. Actually, Mill 108 building, I think, is what Guy was talking about. And I'm pretty certain Mill 108 is fully taxed. I don't believe that they're non-taxed. And that's the problem we're running up against, is how do you distinguish 90 Temple from all the other? I mean, essentially, it's not housing. It's the fact that the housing is generating income, which is its purpose is to generate income, generate revenue, which drives it into being taxable. Even though it's a nonprofit, it becomes taxable if its purpose is to drive revenue. With 90 Temple, you have this, at least that one parcel, you have this unique argument that it's on the verge of destruction. You have Biddeford Housing coming in to essentially save it, rescue it, and providing an additional benefit to the city of one of the units being reserved for the city of Saco's use. So I think 90 Temple is unique, such that we could straight face, a pilot with them. I would worry if this is going to apply citywide to other projects, because we're going to get ourselves, I think, in a situation where some of these larger units like Falls Development on Water Street or Mill 108 are being taxed, and yet we're not taxing the housing authority. For instance, the Falls Development project on Water Street is actually in large part funded by the Maine State Housing Authority. They provided a lot of the money to help redevelop that project. And they've not actually been friendly to the city at times because we've had the audacity to tax Falls Development. But 90 Temple is a very unique parcel. And I think that if we restructured the proposal Guy sent and tailor it to that one property, we certainly, I think, would be able to get them to a pilot. And for the very reasons he's suggesting, because it gives them that predictability. So, I mean, that's the positive aspect of the pilot for them. And he's right about that.
Thank you.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I was just going to state that I share the same concerns of Attorney Murphy. I mean, I've been a big proponent of saving this structure, but I think the points that he raised in his memo are really concerning when I start taking a look at the bigger picture, and having my own personal dealings with some of those property owners. So, and envisioning myself knowing what they're going to say when they see something like this. And I think, Attorney Murphy has definitely keyed in on one here on Water Street where the city has had past issues with, and I could envision they probably would going forward. But I'm certainly agreeable to a pilot strictly for the 90 Temple. And I guess the other comment I had was the assessor seemed to share some concerns also. Is that correct in this packet?
Yeah, that's correct. I had asked Deputy Assessor Kate Kern to weigh in, and she actually kicked it even further up to her colleagues at Maine Revenue Services, who sort of shared similar concerns of Tim Murphy. We're sort of looking at two things. We're looking at 1A and 1B. Kate's opinion and the opinion of those at Maine Revenue was that 1A is pretty consistent with other pilots we have here. 1B is a little bit different of a story, and it should probably be taxed. But 1A is consistent with other pilots that we've had across the board, as far as the amount, I should say.
Thank you.
Any further discussion, questions?
Can I just say one more item?
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody realizes that Bedford Housing is not a normal nonprofit. It's a housing authority established by state statute. It's so it's different than a for-profit. I mean, a for-profit or a nonprofit, which many of the affordable housing complexes in the city of Saco are for-profit entities. So you can't compare at all Bedford Housing to those entities. Our mission is to provide affordable housing for both communities, Bedford and Saco. So it's not, and any revenue we obtain, which is actually less than the revenue that we could have obtained, it's all put back into creating more affordable housing in those communities. So we're meeting our mission, and let's again, we're a quasi-municipal agency, so it's quite a bit different. Just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Executive Director Gagnon. Hearing no further questions, Isabel, Tim, Executive Director Gagnon, thank you for joining us this evening. Council, you'll see this again on a future agenda.
Thank you, everyone.
Item B, market analysis presentation. Planning and Economic Development Director Clavette. Council, does anybody need a recess? Fair enough.
Hi, Jessa Berna, our Economic Development Specialist, is here, and as well as the consultants, Jim Demesis and Krista Franzi, who have been involved with pulling this together. So I'm going to turn this over to Jessa, who's been managing this project, And we'll promise seriously to keep it as brief as we can because it is quite late. But the really great thing is the report you have contains a lot of information, and they'll be able to summarize it really well in their presentation. So Jess, if you want to take over, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you for having us tonight. We've been working with Comoyne Associates since March on developing this market analysis. It really is meant to provide a lot of data and background to support where we got it. Also provides an action plan that we will use as our work plan moving forward. At this point in the process, we have basically a final draft, which we took to the Economic Development Commission earlier this evening, and we're bringing to you this evening. I'm going to hand it over to our consultant team in a moment to give a presentation about those findings, which are also in your packet. At this point, we're looking for any kind of final feedback on that draft, and we're all available to answer any questions after the presentation. So I think that is pretty much it. And thanks for taking the time to listen to us. I'll turn it over to Jim. I think, Jim, did you want me to share my screen?
That would be great if
To
you
do
can
that?
do that. And I will make this brief as well as, and Krista will also make it brief so that we can get to your questions and let you guys get on, let you all get on with your night. Great, thank you. So what I just want to do is, as Jessa had mentioned, we've been working with the city on the economic development market analysis and action plan, and you should have all have received a packet that has the full draft report and then what we call the action plan matrix, or the recommendations essentially, which is the work plan. So let me go forward. Jess, if you can go a couple of slides ahead, I'll tell you when to stop. Right there is fine. If you go back that one, I just want to make sure people are aware of what the project to date is. We've combined a lot of data analysis under demographic, industry, workforce, real estate, held a lot of interviews, did a survey, had a workshop, which several of you attended that was virtual due to COVID, got some really good input from that. Went back and changed some of the data, added some data to refine some of the information people were looking for, and then working with staff, turn that into an action plan in terms of strategies. And again, this isn't, I want to be clear, this isn't meant to be like a strategic vision like you've had in the past. It's really meant to be, what's the data telling us about your markets for the industry and real estate, and therefore what's the work plan going forward to grow the economy. The next step is to take any final feedback and then turn that into a final product, which is an action plan, revised action plan, and then communicate that to throughout Saco. Next slide. Why don't you move ahead? I'm going to skip some of the, several people were on this. Keep going. I just want to get to the next slide. Yes, I just want to highlight a couple of the high findings of the data. The imperative for doing some of the work and the recommendations was how is looking at how Saco is performing, and the results were mixed in the sense of there was decent performance. We looked at population growth, which was higher than some of the communities in the region. We looked at your neighbors within the region. We looked at employment growth, and we looked at property tax base growth. And while you were outperforming on population, you were a bit underperforming on employment growth. And then historically, and then you were about midpoint in terms of looking at tax base growth. And those are the two key criteria that usually the public and the counselors are looking for in terms of, can we grow our tax base? Can we diversify our tax base? And can we have more employment opportunities for our residents and for our workers? Next slide. I want to go, has been, I just really want to point out that even with that data that shows that there's, room for improvement, if you will, there has been strong, it's overall, you're within a strong Southern Maine economy, if you will. So even though you've had COVID and there's a lot of challenges out there nationally and regionally, you still have an economy that is somewhat diverse. It's a bit over-reliant, if you will, on retail and food and accommodations, which can be very volatile, but still has a strong basis in things that are ongoing and always exhibit demand: healthcare, construction and manufacturing, and professional and technical services. And there's been some new businesses to Saco too. You can see those listed there with significant investments over the past year, essentially. Hancock Lumber, $10 million. Another $10 million from Nickel Precision Manufacturing. Ashley Lauren Design, $7 million. And some significant square footage too. And so this has been a good mix of companies and a good mix of investment. Next slide. So one of the challenges that we wanted to make sure that we were addressing is there's also this dichotomy of you have strong levels of income, education, and age demographics. However, some of those jobs that are created there and maintained in Saco, you have people leaving for professional jobs and people coming in for some of the jobs that are lower wages, like retail and service jobs. No jobs are bad jobs per se, but if you start to get too far out of balance, it creates challenges for your own economy where people who are working elsewhere get disconnected from the Saco, and it starts to impact the culture. So, and then secondly, if you're too over reliant on some of the more volatile sectors like retail, you can really suffer when there's an issue like a pandemic that we're in currently. So those are some things to look out for. They're not a crisis per se relative to other communities. You're in relatively decent position, but they are things that for why you should be looking to have an economic plan. With that, let me I do want to jump to some of the findings, Jess, on the sectors. Thank you. I think that was the next slide. And I just want to highlight that we looked at all of your different sectors, and you have some strengths and opportunities in healthcare and medical, which is one of your largest growing sectors. And again, it's mostly recession proof. In other words, people need healthcare. It's projected to grow. And it's also related to some of your professional and technical, like in your bio and life sciences. You have a strong tradition of manufacturing, and it still exists, including across multiple sectors: food production, some aerospace, some medical and life sciences, even textiles, which is a good fit with the region and offers opportunities. And there's opportunities that exist with logistics and manufacturing combined with strong national demand for that. And then at professional and technical, smaller in size, but still relatively large in the compared to other communities with high wages. Things like your R&D, your management, your technical like IT and engineering and those kinds of things. And then highly concentrated, however, though, in retail and food, arts, and accommodations when you combine those together, which can be very volatile. On the real estate side, if you go to the next slide, just a few observations that then will lead to some of the recommendations that I'll turn it over to Krista. I want to highlight that office had fairly weak demand pre-COVID, and with COVID, it's continues to be weak. So it's going to be tough to attract a lot of office users. In fact, it's unknown about how many and when the remote workers will return, creating additional demand. And so there's an excess supply of general office space. Medical office has seen modest increases in the region and has done fairly well in Saco and offers opportunities in the future. Light industrial, there was a lack of space. However, with the it's got modest demand. It doesn't have high demand only because of the condition of the overall economy, but there was demand prior to COVID, and there's the demand that does exist is for your smaller spaces. Retail and services still uncertain as to when it's going to come back and by how much, but that does come back will be based on the fact that you still are, along with Biddeford, a regional center where you attract people to come into your retail, but then also the fact that you have both tourism when it returns and you have a residential base. There'll be demand for local services and local retail. And then finally, what we're seeing in the region is the larger projects that are succeeding even during COVID are mixed use development, where they're not being led by office, they're being led, and they include residential development. That's new offerings in the market for residential. And they also include oftentimes senior residential, and that's helping the developers diversify their portfolio within a development so that they can do a combination of housing, office, retail, and specialty office, and even sometimes industrial. Projects like the Downs in Scarborough, Rock Row in Westbrook, some of the work that's going on in Biddeford, and some of the proposed work down in Portland Forsyth. And so that's what's driving a lot of the more recent development in terms of big opportunities, and will continue to be an opportunity going forward. With that, let me turn it over to Krista. If you can jump ahead a few slides and go to this one. I want to then say how we use the findings and have Krista hit on what our themes were and what some of the specific recommendations were.
Thanks, Jim. So once we completed the research and analysis, we made a series of recommendations to the city for where to focus economic development efforts. So I'll walk through those first and then talk about what's actually in the action plan. So you can see how the research and analysis led to our recommendations, which supported the development of the action plan together as a team, our team working closely with city staff. So next slide, or this slide, sorry. So our first recommendation was for the city to play the role as communicator and connector. Sorry, Jess, I forgot you were already on the other slide. So the role is to communicate about available properties, assets, and opportunities, and really play the role of connecting businesses and developers with those opportunities. The city should avoid property acquisition or otherwise acting as a developer. Real estate development is a high risk endeavor and best left to the market, but the city's job is to really pay attention to market trends. So as opportunities arise, you guys can make those connections. Next slide. The next recommendation is to focus on industries with local and regional strengths. This one's pretty straightforward. Jim just went through what those opportunity sectors are, and you'll see them reappear as we get into the action plan. Next slide. Regarding business parks, one of the primary questions that we were asked to answer is, should we expand the business parks and work to attract modern amenities into the parks? Regarding the amenity question, businesses in the parks that are in the parks today are pretty happy, which was surprising to us because often we'll do this type of work and talk to businesses and they'll tell us, well, we really wish we had a coffee shop and better signage and things like that. But the businesses in Saco in the parks are pretty satisfied. They feel pretty connected to the city as a whole, and they feel like they have what they need within the city. So they're not looking for significant improvements to properties adjacent to them. Regarding the expansion question, the market analysis found that the supply of industrial space in the region continues to be limited, and the demand for that type of space is pretty moderate. There are some growth opportunities in the cross-section of logistics and manufacturing. However, the demand is not significant enough to justify an expansion of the business parks. So our recommendation is to stick with what you have, really focus on keeping those businesses happy and continuing to fill the existing parks, but don't try to expand. Next slide. And our final recommendation was to focus some more energy to the riverfront. We see it as one of Saco's biggest economic development assets moving forward, and I'll explain more what that means when we get into the action plan. Next slide. So we took all of the recommendations and worked with city staff to say, okay, based on what we learned from the market analysis, what can we do? What as a city, which levers do we have that we can pull to further advance economic development? So we developed an action plan that includes 4 initiatives: business attraction and recruitment, business retention and expansion, strategic mixed-use development, and riverfront vitalization. So next slide. So we'll start with business attraction and recruitment. The recommendation or the action plan says here that we'll focus attraction efforts on industry sectors with local and regional strengths. So I told you were going to hear this one again. This next series of recommendations are really around improving the marketing and messaging as it relates to business attraction. So really making sure that all of the real estate listings that are available online through aggregators like LoopNet and CoStar, that all of the sites and information listed in those places is up to date and current. The next one is to communicate the availability of economic development tools and incentives like the Pine Tree Zone, Opportunity Zone, Tax Increment Finance Districts, to make sure that the real estate community really understands what those tools are about and how the city intends to use them. And one really important thing that we heard several times is to clarify the sewer impact fees. There's confusion about how the actual impact, what the actual fees a business will pay. And that confusion can deter businesses from looking at Saco as a place to locate, even though the impact fee is an all-in cost, which basically means that a business will avoid additional fees in the future. But that's not really clear in the city's marketing right now, so we want to make sure to improve that. Next slide. The next initiative is around business retention and expansion. So BRE, or business retention and expansion, is engaging with your businesses that are in the community now and make sure that their needs are being met. You're not waiting for them to come knocking on the door with an issue. You're out there engaging with them either in person, checking in with them by phone, or doing surveys or other things to make sure you're really in tune with what's going on. The city started a BRE program right before COVID hit, but then had to pivot as the pandemic was taking hold, and has an initiative in the action plan to refocus on BRE efforts. So they're going to be really specific on who they're engaging with, and you can see the list here, obviously opportunity industries, as well as industries in the business parks. We're also making sure that they're going to engage with the real estate community, both a give and take of information, sharing what we talked about prior, as well as gathering information about market trends and opportunities from the real estate community. And finally, we included a focus on retail, arts, accommodation, and food services, because obviously this sector is a major employer in Saco and being really hard hit by the COVID pandemic. So all the details are in the action plan, and we've set forth some very specific benchmarks on how many businesses to engage and how we're planning to do that. Next slide. So the strategic mixed-use development initiative is really about taking advantage of the market demand for this type of work, this type of development. It's highly sought after in the market and throughout the region, and is really a strength, could be an opportunity for Saco. So the recommendation is to identify nodes in the city, like along Route 1 or along the riverfront, to focus mixed-use development and work to use your different economic development tools and planning tools to focus mixed use into those nodes. And this also means a willingness to accept residential development with a mixed use component, or with this means to accept a willingness to have residential development within mixed use, because residential is really what makes it pencil out for the developer who is trying to do this type of project. Next slide. And finally, as I mentioned, this is not news to you. The riverfront is one of Saco's most important community and economic development assets. And it really continues to be underutilized from a commercial development standpoint, as well as a public access and recreation perspective. The bike and pedestrian bridge is an example of a really important project that's bringing momentum and energy to this area, but we think there's a lot more potential here. And so we wanted to make sure that was represented in the action plan. So the idea is to work closely with the city of Biddeford, the Saco Main Street, and other anchors in the area to really create some momentum and think longer term. Because as we come out of COVID and start to recover, there's going to be demand for tourism and events and programming. And we think that environment will be ripe to do something big along the riverfront. And I think that's it. So yes, if you have any comments or feedback that you don't want to ask us any questions tonight, you can feel free to email me or Jessa, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. And of course, can answer anything tonight.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Jessa. Counselors, any questions? Feedback, discussion? Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed the report and the presentation. Do you have specific suggestions of projects along the waterfront or things that have worked elsewhere that we might consider?
I think that you're working on your comprehensive plan currently. So what we did not look at was like the land use and environmental components. So I don't want to like comment on what will work where in terms of those, but in terms of the key pieces being some level of mixed use development, incorporating and using the river for recreation and having greater access. Though, like sticking with like the key filters of those criteria will be important. But again, there might be some public projects there, but it's really like being willing to make sure that you're communicating with the real estate community, with including potential developers, about your willingness to work on those kinds of projects and possibly support them through public projects as opposed to like getting in the development game as the as the community does, from a community side. You don't want to be in that game essentially on the private side. And this is similar. While it's the river's unique in the sense, it's not unique in the to some local communities, like Westbrook's doing something similar. Obviously, you share that river with Biddeford, and there's things going on there as well. But in the big picture, it is unique. You got both the unique asset of having coastal properties that drive some of your economic and commercial development and activity, but then you also have riverfront development or riverfront potential. And again, that's something that can't be created by other communities that don't have it.
Thank you.
Councilors, any other questions? Councilors, as Krista pointed out, there is plenty of opportunity to email both Krista and Jessa if questions come about after this meeting and you'd like to get some more information. Jim, Krista, thank you very much for joining us. Jessa, Denise, also thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Council, that brings us to item 11, which is the administrative update. City Administrator Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Starting off with policy reviews and proposals. As you may know, there are many new policies that are going to be coming at us in the near future. We considered our code of conduct tonight, but we do have other things in the pipeline also, including our revised dog ordinance. And we have been working on some other policies in addition that you'll see over the next coming months, including military leave, parental leave. And we're also looking at doing a thorough review of our non-union personnel policy, which has many areas that are a bit out of date. We also need to incorporate Maine's new pay to leave law passed by the legislature, which takes effect January 1st of 2021. So it has been a goal to sort of get through a lot of our existing policies, find areas that may be outdated and need updating, and to also address some real issues confronting us where we don't have it currently addressed in policy. So we're working hard to get through that and bring forward some new policies for council consideration in the near future. I'd like to take an opportunity to thank everyone who showed up at my open office hours event a couple weeks ago. I was really happy to see some people there and some good conversations, some good dialogue, including several people who came to discuss the current project with the Army Corps, the Plan 6 option to build a jetty spur. And we updated them on the latest efforts there, what's going on with the Army Corps, our communication there. As you know, we received a letter recently that they submitted, our congressional delegation submitted on our behalf to the Army Corps in support of our letter. So everyone should know that we are taking that matter very seriously. We continue to work through all options there, and I think we are making some progress and forward momentum. And so I think we're hopefully rounding the corner there. But thank you to everyone that came to discuss that issue as well as others. I appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the feedback. It's really important for me to hear on a basis that is not too far in the distance. So thank you to everyone who came to express their views, and we'll have another one next month. Senior Meal Program, our next Senior Meals event will be hosted by Saco Parks and Rec on December 22nd from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Saco Community Center parking lot. The meal will be provided by the Run of the Mill Public House and Brewery. To sign up or to arrange delivery within the city of Saco, please contact Amelia Meyer at Parks and Rec. Her email is ameyer, M-E-I-E-R, at sacomaine.org, or please call 283-3139, extension 807. This event is also being sponsored by Age Friendly Saco, so thank you once again to them for their support of this program. A reminder to any charter amendments that councilors may be interested in seeing on an upcoming agenda, please submit to me. We will have those sometime after the first of the year on an agenda for consideration. Once again, we are currently advertising a wage analysis RFP. Those responses are due back by December 18th, 2020 at 11 a.m. Please email them to eroy@sacomaine.org. Proposals must include responses to all requirements contained within the RFP in a PDF labeled RFP Compensation Study. And for more information, please visit sacomaine.org/bids. Lastly, I wanted to mention, as most of you know by now, we did present the idea of closing City Hall from December 28th to 31st in order to thank staff for their tremendous efforts this year during the 2020 pandemic. So we are moving forward with that. Thank you all for your consideration and feedback. I think this is extremely well deserved by our staff. I can just say this has been a hell of a year here. I think everyone has done an incredible job in holding it together and plowing through everything to keep the trains running on time and the wheels on the bus going around. It hasn't always been easy. People have been presented with their own personal challenges at home with their children, with other people they've known that have become ill. So this has been, I think, a trying time for everyone. But I think in order to say thank you to city staff, taking these 3.5 days, I think is going to go a long way in building morale and recognizing their service, and then really, I think, doing the right thing to show them that we value what they've done over the past year. And this is ongoing. We're not done here. We're I think at the midway point, or hopefully beyond that. But thank you to everyone for what they've done this year. It's been a pleasure to work with everyone in my first year here through a pretty trying time. We've done a remarkable job, and I just want that to be well noted. And again, for the public, we will be closed December 28th to 31st. The 31st obviously is a half day, and the 1st is New Year's Day. So we will do whatever we can. If you do have any city business, to accommodate you prior to that time or right after that time for car registrations, etc. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me or any other city staff here to help make those arrangements if there may be any interruption. And so again, thank you to everyone for your hard work this year, and well deserved. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, City Administrator Canrath. Council, any questions for the City Administrator? Seeing no questions, moving on to the next item on the agenda is council discussion and comment, agenda item 12. Any council discussion and comment? Councilor Minthorn?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it looks like Mike survived his first week, first night, so that's good. I just want to thank city staff for an incredible year. We've had so many challenges in all the different departments and everything else. I mean, our facilities team has just been unbelievable in all they've accommodated again and again and again. And we've got a meeting coming up Wednesday afternoon, working on Saco Transportation Center and the potential electric charging stations and how we're going to get the wires there and that kind of thing. And hopefully it'll be a full team effort to make that happen. There's a lot going on and has the potential to go on at the Transportation Center. And I hope we approach it optimistically as we get into the new year, because there will be some costs associated, but I think in the long run, it's a great investment. I know there's other investments going on right now in planning for that area that people are looking at. So all in all, it's our gateway and we need to treat it as such and moving forward. So thank you and Merry Christmas to the community.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Any other discussion and comment? Councilor Berman.
Yeah, just real quick, thanks to everyone for the well wishes. Joining the council, I really feel welcome and appreciate all of that. I've also had the time to reflect on the nature of my appointment. I just want to make two quick points. One is that one of the downsides of an appointment process is that the public didn't get to speak, and they didn't get to hear opinions, and they didn't get to weigh in on what visions are important to them. My email is already up and running. People have found it and are contacting me. And the only way that I can know what the residents of Ward 4 are thinking, want, desire, and need is for them to use that to contact me and let me know. And please do and let me know. The second is I've also had time to reflect on Councillor Copeland's many statements regarding the makeup of this body and how well it reflects the makeup of Saco or not. And although, of course, I can't change my personal characteristics, I hope all the citizens of Saco find me as an advocate for those voices that haven't been heard and have struggled to be heard. And please let me know, and I will do my best to elevate the voices of those who have trouble speaking or have not been well represented. So I'm here, and I'm an advocate, and I will do what I can to make sure that your voices are heard. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Any other council discussion and comment? Okay, moving on. There is no executive session for tonight. And so we're at item 15, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Councilor Minthorn, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion on adjourning? Roll call vote on it. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to adjourn at 10:23 p.m. As always, I want to thank everybody for their hard work tonight, the presentations we saw tonight. And since we won't get together again before the holiday season, I wish you and your families, the community, a very happy holiday season and a happy new year. And again, During these times, it's very difficult. So we all have to be mindful of the family dynamics, that families have lost loved ones this year with the pandemic. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So please follow the guidelines that have been put in place. Wear your mask, prepare for social distancing. And it is going to be tough. It's going to be a tough year. This will be the first year that I don't go see my mom, so take that into consideration when you're out there. Please do what is the community and what the humanity needs is everybody coming together and for the betterment of the community. So please wear your mask. Have a great and happy holiday season, and we'll see you on the other side.
Merry Christmas.
Take care, everyone.
Night.
Good night.